Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku's Secrets Were Unraveled by Aizawa? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Izuku sat in class, silent as he idly wrote notes on the quirks of his classmates. Their teacher was currently sleeping, looking dead to the world. He heard Ida complain about the unbecoming behavior of their teacher. Heard the other students speak ill of him. He frowned to himself, uncomfortable with how they seemed to think so little of Aizawa-sensei. Of Eraserhead. He was a pro-hero. He saved the lives of hundreds of people, all while staying out of the spotlight. Did they not know that he worked at night? That last night he had fought and ran around the town, stopping thugs from hurting innocents? It was no wonder he chose to sleep while it was the homeroom PRD. The teacher hadn't been able to get any sleep last night. Izuku continued to write his notes, breaking down the quirks of those in his classroom. He couldn't make up his mind about his homeroom teacher. The man was terrifying, strict, and threatening, but it was different from his previous teachers. After all, Aizawa-sensei had threatened everyone, not just him. The bell rang and Aizawa got up. Within seconds the sleeping bag was hidden away and the man was walking out and Mike-sensei walked in. Izuku saw their lips move slightly, a quick exchange of words that he couldn't make out. Mike-sensei greeted them, a bright smile on his face before starting them on their classwork. Learning English. Izuku pulled out a different notebook and took notes on the lesson. But, throughout the lesson he couldn't help keeping track of where Mike-sensei was. A habit from his lessons with his previous English teacher. Izuku shuddered, pushing away the memories that threatened to overwhelm him, trying to focus on the assessment quiz the teacher had given. And so the rest of the daily classes passed. Izuku went home and worked out, continuing the schedule All Might had set out for him, carefully planning out what to give each of his teachers. The next day he arrived at the class a minute before the bell rang, earning a reproachful look from Ida. Aizawa-sensei sat at the desk looking less tired than yesterday, but he still held bags under his eyes. Izuku hesitated for a moment before walking up to the desk. The man gave a tired look at him. "Good morning, sensei," Izuku mumbled out, nervous as he held out his gift. A thermos, filled with coffee. Aizawa raised an eyebrow, but accepted it with a brief nod. "Good morning to you as well, Midoriya." Izuku gave a smile and headed over to his seat. He bit his cheek as his eyes caught on Kaken, who was glaring at him angrily, still mad that stupid useless Deku had managed to get in. And that Izuku now had a quirk. "Teacher's pet," Kaken hissed as he passed by. He itched to take out his notebook and start writing, to escape away from those angry red eyes. They promised pain. After taking his seat he looked and saw Aizawa sipping on the coffee, his lip curled up in a small barely noticeable smile. Izuku counted that as a win. He may be a teacher's pet, but it was the only way to get the teachers to at least ignore him, to grade him fairly. Bribery. Kaken had told him once. Izuku supposed it was, but without it he would be failing classes, all because teachers didn't like that a quirkless kid was decent at getting the correct answers. They saw him as less than human, but because he was so kind, so helpful, they felt guilty for marking him down on purpose. So long as it got him fair treatment, Izuku considered it a win. If they didn't accept his gifts, would they be like his old English teacher and want a different sort of gift? Izuku wasn't sure he could bring himself to do so if that was the case. Perhaps UA would be different, but Izuku didn't want to risk it. He already barely scraped by with Aizawa-sensei's logical ruse. The teacher had seemed amused by the end of it though, and hadn't expelled him. Despite his pathetic showing, one of the other kids, a boy by the name of Mineta, hadn't done much better. That night at home he might have had a minor freakout, because he actually made it through the quirk assessment test. Was actually in UA. The morning passed with normal classes and Izuku found a small minute or two to give his new teachers little gifts. Mostly food. The teachers never turned away his gifts, but they did seem confused as to why he gave them. Midnight asked him why, and he stammered out that it was to show his appreciation to the teachers for doing their jobs. Finally the afternoon started, the fun classes. All Might came into the room with a bright smile and a small quip of him coming in like a normal person. Then he told them that they would be doing battle training, and that their costumes were ready. At least he didn't need to get All Might a gift. His mentor had told him time and time again that while they were appreciated, he didn't need to get him anything. That simply being able to train him was enough for the older man. Izuku quickly changed and headed out, remembering the trouble he had in choosing a design to send for his costume. In the end he went with a simple jumpsuit and a mouthguard. He could add stuff later if he could figure out what he needed. Uraraka complimented him, and complained about her suit being too tight. Mineta just gave a thumbs up, saying something about the hero course being the best. Despite that statement, Izuku got a weird feeling from his fellow classmate. One that vaguely reminded him. No, he refused to think about him. All Might started explaining the battle simulation, and midway through his explanation Aizawa walked in, eye bags under his eyes, but despite his tired look his eyes still seemed alert. All Might looked at him after he finished and Aizawa turned to them. "I'm here to get a better impression of what we're working with," he muttered, his gaze hovering on him for a second longer before continuing on. Izuku swallowed, wondering why the teacher's gaze had stayed on him longer. At least it seemed like it had been longer than the other students. Was it just his imagination? Or has he already messed up and the homeroom teacher was thinking of expelling him? While Izuku worried over if he had done something wrong, the teams were drawn. His attention was grabbed when he heard his name going against Kaken. Uraraka coming over to him revealed that he was teamed with the friendly girl. The villain team had 5 minutes to set up, and Izuku took that time to explain all he knew about Kaken's quirk. Shoyuta gave a tired sigh, only a couple days into this new school year and he could already feel the gray hairs growing. He just knew this whole class was going to drive him insane. Starting with the child who didn't even have a basic grasp of his quirk. Children developed their quirks at a young age, and worked with counselors to make sure this very thing didn't happen. But it seemed that the irresponsible problematic child didn't listen or work on his quirk at all. Though he supposed there was always the possibility of the quirk counselor being incompetent. He had been planning on expelling the child and being done with him, but the boy had fought hard in the tests, despite only using his quirk once. Without debilitating his arm either. His score had been the last, just barely though one of the other kids had also been really low, and that was using his quirk. Mineta Minoru. The kid so far wasn't proving himself worthy of being in the class. It was almost a shame that the boy had managed to beat out the problem child by 1 point. Mineta was exactly the kind of kid he would expel. Ah well, he would have an opportunity later if the kid didn't start shaping up. Or if he continued his perverted behavior. Shoyuta idly thought, frowning as he gazed at the students from his sleeping bag. He heard All Might call for the start and split his attention between the match and the students, paying attention to everything, even if his students thought he was just taking a nap. Which he probably would have chosen to do if he hadn't gotten the coffee this morning from the problematic child. Which was strange. Why would the kid bring him a coffee? And then there was the obvious history between Bakugo and Midoriya. The fight between the two started in the battle simulation and Shoyuta kept an ear on the students complaining about the lack of sound, and the other on the little transceiver so he could listen in to what the fighting kids were saying. And the explosive blonde was angry. Hurling insult after insult. Shoyuta pursed his lips together. If it was him, he would stop the exercise right now, but this was All Might's class and he would let the man run it how he saw fit. For now. If things went too far he would make sure it was stopped. Shoyuta was 80% sure it would come to that point, so he sighed in annoyance as he got out of his sleeping bag, leaning against the wall close to the door, ready to exit and make way up the building in order to subdue the two boys. Shuta's frown deepened as he heard mumbles coming from Bakugo's mic, something along the lines of a pebble and quirklessness and worthless Deku. That was perhaps the most worrying, as Deku was the nickname that the explosion-quirked boy gave to Midoriya. Shoyuta frowned, his mind piecing together a picture he really didn't want to deal with. It also didn't seem helpful that Midoriya's classmates had picked up that nickname as well. And then Shoyuta saw Bakugo holding up his wrist, where he had cannons that stored up the nitroglycerin sweat the boy excreted. And Shoyuta was moving. Ignoring that All Might was telling Bakugo to stop, he recognized the look on the boy's face. There was no way he was going to stop, and Shoyuta knew that he was going to be too late to stop the explosion, but hopefully he could get Midoriya out of there alive, that the boy hadn't died from the first explosion. Seconds later, and he made it up the first couple flights of stairs as the explosion went off, making his way further up even as All Might made his own call to let it continue. Which said show Yuta off. As a teacher, it was his duty to stop this. All Might may find Bakugo's words alright, but wanting to maim another student as badly as they could get away with was not something a hero student should want to do. Sho Yuta made his way to where the students were fighting. It was more like a brutal beatdown. Sho Yuta activated his quirk, glaring at Bakugo as he used his capture tape to pull the boy off the badly beaten Midoriya. I'm calling this battle off on account of extreme violence against the opposing team. Villains lose. Bakugo was yelling something about not being fair, that he hadn't been that rough on Midoriya. Sho Yuta continued his glare. You don't consider broken bones, a concussion and severe burns extreme violence against your classmate? He turned off his quirk, keeping the boy bound in his capture weapon. Bakugo remained silent, glaring at him. We will be discussing this later. After school is over, go to the principal's office. Sho Yuta carefully picked up the wounded boy, surprised to find the boy was still awake, though his eyes were glazed over. Midoriya flinched, struggling to get away from him as Sho Yuta picked him up. You're safe now, the battle's over, I'm taking you to Recovery Girl. Recovery Girl? Midoriya slurred questioningly. Just, you need to stay awake for just a bit longer. Midoriya at least stopped struggling, but his eyes were trained eerily on him. Distrust and fear were prominent in that expression. Sho Yuta sighed when the bots came into view with a stretcher and he laid the boy on it. Sho Yuta frowned. He knew that the bots would get Midoriya to Shizenji's office safely, that the boy would be healed. But the child was giving him way too many red flags, and he wanted answers that Shizenji might be able to give him. So he followed alongside the bots. What happened? Shizenji demanded of him as she went to work on healing Midoriya. Sho Yuta explained and she scowled, complaining about All Might's recklessness and how he wasn't a good role model for Midoriya. May I look over his medical file? He questioned her after she finished healing. She looked at him, eyes narrowing as she looked for something before giving permission. After a moment she nodded. Sure, anything specific you're looking for? No, just a feeling. Alright, take all the time you need. She gestured to her computer, which had Midoriya's medical file opened. Sho Yuta sat down and started looking over everything. As he read over it, his frown deepened. Midoriya had never been submitted to the hospital for broken bones before. Had only ever gotten his required vaccine shots and check-ins. Yet, the most alarming thing was the date he supposedly gained his quirk. The day of the entrance exam. This was not good, especially if he was considered quirkless before. Society didn't treat those without quirks well. Whether they were active participants, or just bystanders, too afraid to help. It would explain some of the behavior he had noticed though. Shota sat on a chair, waiting for Midoriya to wake up. He was reading over the files Nizu had sent him, and he was really displeased over what he had seen so far. It wasn't often that the teachers of UA actually looked at the notes previous teachers had made on a student, preferring to make their own judgments on how the students act in their classes. But there were times it was necessary, such as if violent behavior was shown and they needed to know if it was typical of the student. Shota wanted to know if Bakugo's behavior towards Midoriya was normal. Yet, according to the file, Bakugo was a perfectly behaved, upstanding citizen. No records of any misbehavior whatsoever. That of course raised some red flags. So he requested Midoriya's file as well. What he read made him sad on behalf of his student. There were a ton of remarks on it, calling Midoriya a troublemaker, an unruly student, a liar, an attention seeker. All of these comments were the complete opposite of what he had seen from Midoriya in the past couple of days. If anything, Midoriya avoided attention, avoided people and stammered his way out of conversations. Then there was the note from the English teacher. Midoriya has tried on multiple occasions to bribe me with food and such to bump up his horrible grade. Such behavior is unbecoming and I have seen fit to give him detention for it. Shota frowned at his phone and blinked when the door was thrown open and Hisashi came in. There you are. I've been looking for you. Quiet, Midoriya is recovering, Shota replied, gesturing to the child. Hisashi nodded, his green eyes looking over the child. I wanted to speak with you about Midoriya actually. Shota glanced up from his phone. So you noticed it too? I noticed something, not sure if it's what you noticed. Shota raised an eyebrow at his husband. What did you notice? The little listener seemed absolutely terrified in my class. I spoke with Namuri. She said that he only acted a bit nervous in her class. For me though, I noticed that he kept tracking my movements, that he could barely be within a few feet of me without looking like he wanted to bolt. Shota stared at his phone for a moment before replying, I don't think it's you necessarily. But that you teach English. What do you mean? He turned his phone towards Hisashi, letting his husband read the note the previous English teacher left. Shotas. I don't like this. Shota grimaced. Me neither, I think this needs to be delved into further. Hisashi nodded. All right, what's the plan? I'm going to go to Aldrin and ask them directly for their thoughts on both Bakugo and Midoriya. Hisashi, if you don't mind, I want you to go ask Midoriya's parents for their thoughts and such. Also ask All Might about Midoriya. Hisashi nodded and was about to leave when Shizenji came out of her office, holding onto a printed picture. I have the results, she spoke. Let me guess, it's as we thought? She nodded. I don't know why that doctor of his told him he was quirkless. He clearly doesn't have the extra toe joint. Why didn't the doctor just explain that the child needed to meet some requirement for his quirk to work? Perhaps you should ask the doctor, Shota responded. I tried to call the number, it's been disconnected. Searching up the doctor's name reveals that he has been missing for the past 8 years. A shifting from the bed let them know that Midoriya was waking up. Perhaps Midoriya could answer a few questions for us if he's up to it. Hisashi frowned. I think it would be better if I wasn't in the room. If you're going to keep Midoriya around for another hour or so, I can go ahead and go talk to his parents now. All right, fill me in later. Of course, Hisashi said, giving him a grin before he walked out of the room. It took another couple minutes, but eventually Midoriya woke up. Instantly he tensed before he calmed down a bit as he looked around. What happened? Bakugo went too far in the battle simulation and you were critically wounded. Midoriya gave a nod. Do you feel up to answering some questions related to your medical records for us? Shizenji asked. The boy frowned, a confused look in his eyes. Why yes. All right, according to our record you were diagnosed as quirkless at age 4, correct? Midoriya nodded, but I was just a late bloomer. Yes, but we were wondering why you had quirkless on your page instead of undetermined. I wasn't expected T to get a quirk, since I have the double P pinky joint. Shota and Shizenji exchanged glances. Midoriya, did your doctor tell you that you have the double pinky joint? Why yes. Midoriya told them, his voice confused. Shota sighed as Shizenji said, you don't have the double pinky joint. You should have never been diagnosed as quirkless. Midoriya's gaze snapped up to Shizenji, a questioning look in his eyes. The boy cut off. Just to be clear, when was the first time your quirk manifested? Shota questioned. The D-Day of the E-entrance exam, Midoriya answered hesitantly, hands clenching the blanket tightly. Am I going to be expelled? No. You are not, you haven't done anything wrong, but I do have some questions for you regarding what happened in the battle simulation, if you feel up to answering them. Shota answered, keeping his expression blank at the thought that the child had only just developed his quirk then. No wonder why he destroyed his bones. All right. Hisashi was a loud man, both by nature of his quirk and in personality. But he could be quiet, he knew how to stay silent and let others do the talking, to blend in when necessary. Of course, blending in with his hero outfit was impossible, but in his civilian where people often didn't recognize him. He glanced at the paper, double-checking he was at the right apartment building before he knocked. While waiting for the door to open, he activated a small recorder, so he would have the conversation recorded for Shota to hear. It took a minute, but the door opened, revealing a green-haired woman that looked remarkably similar to Midoriya, which was to be expected given this was probably his mom. But her eyes seemed glassy, empty of any emotions. Who are you? She asked in a lifeless tone. He smiled brightly. Hisashi Yamada, I am one of the teachers at UA. Oh, did Izuku get in trouble already? She asked in a bland tone, showing no worry or concern. The woman, Inko Midoriya, did step aside to let him in at least. Your son is not in any trouble, but there was an incident in the training and he was injured enough to be sent to Recovery Girl for the rest of the class PRD. I see. Is that all? Hizashi really didn't like the tone of her voice, the way she moved, the way she talked. It was as if she was a walking corpse. Hell, he was sure he had seen a few corpses that looked more lively than this woman did. No, while I am here I wanted to ask a couple questions about your son's past. Okay. Hizashi sat down across from the woman, glancing around to see that the home was empty of pictures of personal belongings. He wondered if the entire house was like this, or if they kept their personal belongings in their rooms. To start with, can you give me the gist of how Midoriya was treated? What he is like? Of course, Izuku is a quiet kid at home. The school always calls and tells me how he causes them trouble. That we're lucky they don't expel him for all the fights he gets in, she answered flatly, no sort of tone to tell how she was feeling. It was as if she was reporting facts. What are your thoughts on what the school says? Hizashi prompted. The woman gave a long, slow blink. What is there to think about? Izuku gets in trouble, that's all there is to it. Hizashi wanted to know what sort of drag the woman was on, or was it medication? Because he didn't believe that anyone could act like she does naturally. Ma'am, do you know why the doctor misdiagnosed Midoriya? My son is quirkless. The doctor didn't misdiagnose him, the woman stated. Did Midoriya not tell his mom about his quirk? Hizashi wondered to himself. Your son has a quirk, he informed her. No, he doesn't, the walking corpse of a woman said. Hizashi frowned and pulled out his phone, pulling up a short clip of Izuku punching the zero-pointer. This is Midoriya using his newly discovered quirk in the entrance exam. The woman watched with empty glassy eyes. That's not my son. Hizashi blinked. He's not? My son is quirkless. He wanted to groan, he really did. This woman seemed fixated that her son was quirkless. Mrs. Midoriya, what are your thoughts on Midoriya being in UA? Hizashi probably could have asked the question better, to sound less judgmental of her. But from how the woman reacted so far, he doubted she would notice or care. Izuku is still chasing after a dream, she intoned. Shota, I really don't like this, Hizashi thought to himself. The corpse of a woman was either mentally not there, or on some sort of drag or medication. Either way, there was no way for this woman to take proper care of a child. Perhaps the father was the one who took care of them. Where is Mr. Midoriya? Working overseas. His smile was strained as he replied, I see. When would it be possible for us to get in touch with him? It won't. My brother doesn't come home. Brother? He was asking for her husband. Was Midoriya her maiden name? What of Izuku's father? She stared at him blankly, unanswering. Unnerved, he simply swallowed and moved on. Right, thank you for your time. One last question before I go. He looked at her, seeing her blank 1,000-meter stare. Do you love your son? There was no confusion in her eyes over being asked such a question, no recognition that it wasn't normal to be asked that question. Her mouth opened and she answered, yes. Her voice was flat, expressionless. Just like her eyes. He just nodded and turned and walked out, his normally ever-present smile now thoroughly gone. Shota groaned, finally able to arrive home after the long day, first having questioned Midoriya, and then having dealt punishment to Bakugo. It was a shame that the boy had too much potential as a villain if he expelled the brat. But mandatory therapy should hopefully help the boy get better. He would also be switching the seats of Midoriya to move him away from Bakugo. Shota frowned at the silence of the apartment and went off to find his normally loud husband. By this point Hizashi should be filling the apartment with music. He went into their shared office room and raised an eyebrow, surprised to see Hizashi glaring at the paper in front of him as if it had insulted everything about his existence. Carefully he went over to his husband and put a hand on his shoulder. Feeling the man relax a bit as he noticed him. Did someone mangle English that badly? No, Hizashi practically growled. In fact, he answered everything almost perfectly. Shota's eyebrows scrunched together. And you're unhappy because? It's Midoriya's paper. Shota's eyes narrowed. which, according to his previous English teacher, that class was his worst subject. His grades in that class were borderline failing. Shota was really not liking where this was going. Exactly. So what are you thinking? Please don't let both of them be thinking the same thing. That his previous English teacher purposely misgraded him, Hisashi spat. Shota repressed a sigh. They were both thinking along the same lines. Still, that wasn't the only thing that was upsetting his husband. Something else upset you, Shota pointed out. I spoke with Midoriya's mother. He gave a nod. It was what they planned after all, and? That woman is a walking corpse who denies her son has a quirk even after video evidence. That certainly threw him for a loop. What? Hisashi opened the laptop. I already uploaded the recording to the computer and listened to it a few more times, his husband grumbled. The recording his husband made was already open. Hisashi clicked play and Shota listened to the audio of the conversation. The voice of the woman sent chills through him. The voice was empty, almost like a person under the effects of a truth quirk or a control quirk. A voice of someone with no personality or free will. A puppet. He listened as the woman automatically assumed Midoriya had caused trouble. How she didn't react to the fact he had been hurt. That she didn't investigate why her son was supposedly a troublemaker at school, but quiet at home. Then came the matter of his supposed quirklessness, and the woman showed some bit of personality, even if her voice remained lifeless. She showed denial. Denial that her son had a quirk. Then Hisashi asked about what she thought about Midoriya attending UA. Her response was to say he was chasing after a dream. Not his dream. Just a dream. As if she didn't believe he could accomplish it. Then there is the matter of the father, who she didn't even react to when Hisashi mentioned it. She only spoke of a brother, Hisashi Midoriya, who works overseas and can't be contacted. Hisashi of course asked the woman if she loved Midoriya, and she said yes, but there was no warmth in her tone. Shota could understand why his husband was so upset. Talking with her must have been very jarring. This isn't just a simple case of past bullying, Shota stated. Hisashi nodded. No, it's not. Shota closed his eyes. Tomorrow I will go to Aldrin and speak with the teachers in person. All right, but for now how should we act around the little listener? I'm going to make sure the boy knows he can come to me if he has a problem, but for you it might take a bit more time, since his previous English teacher misgraded him. Don't touch him without permission and don't bring attention to him in your class. All right, what will we tell the other teachers? For now? Nothing. Are you sure? They could help us. Shota shook his head. They would be more of a hindrance than a help. If our suspicions are correct, then Midoriya's teachers haven't been around before, so if all of his teachers start being extra friendly with him, then it might make him panic. Hisashi nodded. The two fell into a silence as Hisashi continued grading the rest of the papers and Shota opened up a document on the laptop, making a new case file with Midoriya Izuku being the subject. Shota walked towards the gate of UA and frowned at seeing all the reporters standing in front. Then he saw them surrounding one of his students, a tuft of green hair barely visible. He stalked forward, making his way through the crowd, and saw Midoriya was about to have a panic attack from all of the questions being thrown at him. He stepped in front of his student. Do you have nothing better to do than terrorize the students of UA? He questioned them. We deserve an interview with All Might. A woman shouted. He narrowed his eyes. If you want an interview with him, then you should go through his agency to schedule it. You have no business blocking the way of the students and interrupting classes. All Might isn't here today, he's off. Now please leave, he stated, waving a hand at them, shooing them off. He turned and gently nudged his student towards the school, hoping the touch wouldn't send his student into a panic attack. Come on, Midoriya, he muttered quietly to his student, who finally started moving. Shota heard the gate close behind them as one of the reporters must have tried to cross the barrier. Midoriya? Are you all right? The boy gave a jerky nod. Shota sighed. Midoriya, do you want to take homeroom off? The boy looked up at him with wide eyes. The media were surrounding you. I can understand if you would want to take some time to recuperate. I'll be fine. Shota looked down at the kid, noticing the boy was purposely regulating his breath. The kid looked at different things, his hand going to his wrist. and Shota realized the kid was grounding himself, keeping himself from a panic attack. That the boy was aware enough to do that? He must deal with panic attacks a lot. Alright kid, let's get to class then. Midoriya nodded, glancing at him occasionally as they walked. Biting his lip, as if he wanted to ask something, but wasn't. Do you want to ask me something, Midoriya? And no, Midoriya stated, looking away, cheeks turning a bit red. Embarrassment. Shota wanted to sigh. Why were children so illogical? I won't get mad for whatever question you may ask. If I deem the question too personal, I will tell you so. Does that sound good? Midoriya nodded. I wanted T to know if why you liked tea the coffee? The boy stammered out, not looking at him. It was good, he responded, debating whether to add more information or not. All coffee was good, but he had a penchant towards preferring coffee with an unhealthy amount of sugar. He didn't want to make the kid feel like he has to bring him more coffee, but he also didn't want the kid to feel like he didn't approve. Shota had the feeling that the kid gave teachers gifts more than to show appreciation. In fact, the old English teacher of his mentioned them as bribes. Shota closed his eyes for a second. Today was going to be a long day. They were almost at the classroom. He had probably another minute or two to ask a question and get an answer. Why did you get me coffee yesterday? Tea to show my appreciation, the boy responded quickly. Habit? A practiced response. Why coffee? Why not a card or something simple? Why you were busy, tea taking down all to those villains, the boy answered. I know for a fact that none of that information was publicized. So how did you know? He questioned, keeping his voice even. Why you patrol MIA area? Is seen wire fight sometimes from MI window, Midoriya answered, keeping his eyes trained to the floor. He gave a nod. He hadn't ever really thought that some of the people who lived in the apartment complexes might see him around often enough to recognize him as a patrolling hero. Though that would explain why some people would give him nods while in his patrol area. But that also brought up why the boy went to Aldrin and not Yukigaka Junior High, which was closer to the area he patrolled. With that they arrived at the class and he opened the door, letting Midoriya enter first and take his seat. He looked at the class. As you know, I was going to access your battle tactics yesterday, but because of Bakugo using excessive force I was forced to review the rest of you instead. Most of you did a good job. Mineta, this will be your only warning. Start shaping up to be a better hero or you're expelled. Your potential is falling dangerously close to zero. Frankly, Shota didn't like how the boy eyed the girls in the class and was waiting for when the boy either went too far or hit zero potential. Bakugo, if you keep displaying such violent tendencies you will be forced into the general education track, or expelled. Onto homeroom business. Sorry for the sudden announcement. He wasn't sorry, it was amusing to see all of them tense up, staring at him with wide, intense eyes. But today, the kids leaned forward, and he could hear a couple students muttering different possibilities. You'll pick a class president. The students gaped, staring at him as Kaminari spoke out. Such a normal school activity. Do whatever you want, just make it quick, he muttered in response to Ida asking if voting was acceptable. He zipped up his sleeping bag and collapsed onto the floor. He closed his eyes, but kept an ear open to the students. All of the kids had raised their hand except Midoriya, though that was to be expected. And then the votes came in, 3 for Midoriya, and 3 for Yaoyorozu. Emmy? B but I don't W want T to BBT the C class. P preci I didn't. The kids stammered out, even worse than normal, probably from having to talk to the class at large. Shota scowled as the kids started to talk to Midoriya, trying to pressure him into accepting the spot. Midoriya said he doesn't want to be class president, thus he should not have been voted for. Whoever voted for him recast your votes. Ida, Uraraka, and Yaoyorozu each went and cast new votes. 1 more vote went to Yaoyorozu, and 2 went for Ida. Great, Shota deadpanned. Yaoyorozu is class president and Ida is vice. Then it was time for normal classes to start, and he left the room to go teach a history class to the 1B brats. He passed by Hizashi in the hall and the man gave him a nod. Keep your distance from Midoriya. He nearly had a panic attack from the media, and we still don't know how badly his previous English teacher treated him. All right, I will take care, Shota, Hizashi murmured back. He gave a nod to his husband and walked on. He entered into 1B and glared at the kids who were talking loudly. At least his kids knew how to keep an indoor volume. He stood in front of the room, waiting for them to quiet down. 22 seconds. At least his class went quiet within 5 seconds of him appearing in the room. He began the lecture, teaching the class of history before quirks appeared, going particularly over the strategies that pre-quirked people used, how they fought. He looked over the class, seeing if any of them were getting the lesson he was trying to teach. None of them seemed to be picking up on it. Shame. The class ended and he went on to the next class of brats to teach. General education. Same lesson, but this time one kid seemed to perhaps pick up on what he was trying to get across. A purple-haired kid, though he hadn't memorized this class's names yet. The day continued passing and finally it was lunch hour and he went outside for some fresh air, meeting Hizashi. The alarm went off and the two of them rushed to the front gate where they saw the media had entered. They demanded answers and the two of them blocked the way. "Give us all might," one reporter shouted, as if they were holding the man hostage. "He's out today." Hizashi responded back with his loud voice, making it better for them to hear him. "Just give us a comment. That's all we want." "If we give you people an inch, you'll ask for a mile," Shota responded, though he doubted they actually heard him over the racket they were making. "This is completely illegal, villainous even. Can we blow them away already?" Hizashi muttered to him from the corner of his lips. "No matter how satisfying, it would be illogical. Let's wait for the cops," Shota muttered back. After another 10 minutes the cops arrived and drove the media off, Hizashi giving a call out of, "Bad media bad," as if they were unruly dogs. Shota smirked at that, especially as he saw one particularly annoying reporter scowl angrily. Sure, Hizashi might get some bad rep from it, but honestly his husband could handle it and even turn it around on his radio show. He returned to the class. It was now time for heroic classes, but first his kids needed to finish picking their council members. Yayarozu stated how she thought Ida had handled the emergency better than her, and that she wanted to switch their positions. The class agreed and the rest of the members were picked. Now that this waste of time is done, let's move on to today's heroic lesson. The different types of heroes and how each have different sorts of regulations. Above-ground heroes, rescue heroes, support heroes, underground heroes. You have heard these terms before when paired with heroes, but not only does it give you an idea of what type of hero they are, but also what sort of rules they must follow. Each hero is expected to act a certain way, to follow certain rules. That's why one must pick the type of hero you want to be. Do you want to be an above-ground hero and be known to the world, to fight villains who appear in the day, to patrol the streets to offer comfort to people who see you? Do you want to be a hero who mostly works in hospitals or when disasters strike, to help those who are wounded? Do you want to be the one who supports the bigger heroes, to give them the opening to take out the villain? Do you want to keep to the shadows, to fight the villains that don't show themselves during the day? These are all questions you should ask yourselves, because you need to know this answer sooner than you think. These next 2 weeks we will be going over different types of hero, so you can determine which fits you best. He looked at the class to see he had all of their attention as he pulled out a stack of papers. To help, I have a personality quiz that will give you a general idea of what hero you should be. This is personal and self-graded. You can keep the results to yourself or share them. Do not bug others about their results. Just because you get a certain result doesn't mean you have to be that type of hero. Ida passed out the papers, and some of the kids started working on it right away, flying through the answers, while others seemed to be more thoughtful and taking their time in picking an answer. Shota pulled out a jelly packet and drank it before getting into his sleeping bag and getting comfortable, waiting for the day to be over. The quiz would keep them busy for a while, and he was waiting for the other teachers to show up. Hizashi, who would tell about above-ground heroes. Cementos, who was a support hero. Shizenji, who would tell them about rescue heroes. While they would get a different perspective from 13 tomorrow. He of course would tell them more about underground heroes. At least he was for 1A. For 1B they had Vlad King as an underground hero. While the type of hero they chose would be what sort of regulations they had to follow, they still had to be proficient in all aspects of heroism, not just the one they would specialize in. Finally the other teachers finished with giving their lesson to 1B and came in. Hisashi started off, and Shota watched Midoriya, saw how he shrunk in a bit, trying to make himself stand out less. How the kid ducked his head down and jotted notes in his book without looking up, his eyes barely able to be seen, but what he could see was that Midoriya looked to where Hisashi was 3-4 times a minute, never leaving the man out of sight for too long. Cementos went next, and while Midoriya's gaze kept flickering to Hisashi, he wasn't curled up as much. Then Shizenji's lesson, and he ducked down a bit more when her gaze lingered on him as she spoke about helping civilians who break their bones. Finally it was his turn to speak, and he was a bit surprised to see that Midoriya was barely curled, and seemed to be able to keep his attention on him most of the time, only checking once a minute or so to see if Hisashi was still in the same spot. Perhaps the kid felt more comfortable with him? That would make Shota's goal easier. He would need to gain the kid's trust if he wanted to help the boy. After he finished up the lecture, he dismissed the class, letting them leave a couple minutes early. He had some junior high teachers to interrogate. Shota entered the school, seeing how empty it was. A woman with a mutant-type quirk that gave her whiskers was walking him to the teacher's lounge, where the teachers he wanted to meet with were waiting. The teachers who taught Bakugo and Midoriya. He had called yesterday, asking them to meet. He gave them no reason, hadn't needed to as they didn't ask once learning he was a teacher from UA. "This is the room," the woman said, in a high-pitched cutesy voice. He gave her a nod and entered. He looked around at the teachers, who were sitting around. The principal stood up, coming over to shake his hand. "Ah, hello, you must be the one who called us yesterday." "Yes," he stated, nodding once, reluctantly shaking the other hand as was polite. "I will get straight to the point. I am the homeroom teacher of 2 of the students who came from this school, and wanted to speak, teacher to teacher, about some of the issues I have witnessed. I believe that by getting to know how such issues were dealt with by previous teachers will help me to choose how to take care of this particular matter," he stated, looking between all of them. The teachers grimaced. "Midoriya is quite a problematic child. It's why we were so surprised when he managed to get into UA. We thought for sure with all of the marks on his record they wouldn't let him in. The only records UA looks at is the police records. So long as no marks show up there, we give each student an equal chance." "Alright, well, as I'm sure you have figured out by now, Midoriya is a troublesome student, always seeking attention, crying when he doesn't get it, lying about bullying, claiming that other students hurt him because of his quirklessness." Shota keeps his expression flat. The entire time, not giving any indication as to what he was thinking. Another teacher spoke up. "The boy is always distracting his classmates with his mumbling, and stalking the students while writing in that notebook, which he won't let anyone see. It's a shame that his attitude is so poor. He would be a good student otherwise with his good grades," one of the female teachers mutters, pity in her eyes. One of the younger-looking teachers, who hadn't spoken up yet, scoffed. "I can't believe you let that kid bribe you. His grades are horrible in my class, as he deserves." So, that man must be the English teacher, and now Shota could see it wasn't just the English profession his husband shared with the man. They both had blonde hair, and while Hisashi's eyes were green, this man had yellow eyes. Still, besides for the blonde hair and somewhat similar builds, they looked fairly different. "Bribery?" Shota asked them. "It's not bribery, Nashi. Like we would let a few gifts sway us to grading in his favor. He gets the grades he earns in my class." The other female teacher responded to the English teacher. They continued on with various statements of Midoriya's behavior, all of them so wrong and off the mark it was almost funny. None of it was particularly new information, at least, not what they were saying. The most telling were their reactions, how they acted when they spoke of him. The 2 most interesting were the second woman and the English teacher. The woman looked guilty and ashamed, almost reluctant to speak ill of the kid. Possibly being forced then to agree with the rest of the teachers. Also someone to talk to alone to get the truth of the situation. The English teacher, on the other hand, his eyes held a glee. The teacher didn't feel repentant at all, and he had this twisted look that Shota had seen a couple times before. A look he felt sickened by, for he had only seen it on Arpisis. It didn't help that the way the English teacher, Nashi, spoke Midoriya's name like it was a possession. "I see, and what of Bakugo?" As expected, they went on how he was an amazing student, helpful to others, the perfect hero. They fell silent, and Shota looked at each of them, Thank you for your time, he said flatly, getting up and leaving the room. As he thought, talking to the teachers as a whole was mostly a waste, but it got him 2 leads, 1 the woman, and 2 the English teacher that gave off RPST vibes. Shota really hoped he was wrong on that account. He found a building across the street and scaled it, waiting on the roof as the teachers soon came out and headed different ways. He followed the woman for a bit, dropping down behind her on a somewhat empty street. I would like the truth, not that bullshit they had you spewing. She jumped, turning around to face him with wide eyes, a startled squeak escaping her mouth. Why, you knew. I did say that I have both boys in my class. I'll tell you, can we find a better place to talk? Test. Looking nervous. Of course, lead the way to where you would like to speak. She led them to a small internet cafe. They sat down and she sighed. That poor boy, I wanted to help him, but the principal and other teachers were all okay with the boy suffering. They wanted him to suffer, since they hated that they had a quirkless student, tarnishing their school's reputation. The boy only gave gifts, because if he didn't then all the teachers would misgrade him for the worse. Nashi, his English teacher, wouldn't accept those gifts though. I overheard him saying he wanted the boy to give him some other gift to get his grades up to where they should be. I don't know what sort of gift he wanted, but Midoriya I guess refused to give it to him, or only gave him a part of it or something, as the boy's grades always stayed right at that 1 point away from failing mark. The kids did bully him. One of the worst was Bakugo. That kid would destroy Midoriya's items, homeworks, textbooks, desks and other school property, and all the teachers blamed Midoriya instead of Bakugo, the woman said crying. I couldn't help him, not without losing my job, and I have a family to take care of. I wish I could have helped the boy more. Shota gave a nod. You should start looking for a new job, because when I get through Alderaan will be shut down on account of quirk discrimination, among other crimes. Would you be willing to testify? The woman gave a small sob as she nodded. All right, thank you for your help, but before I go, what can you tell me about that English teacher, Nashi? Nashi Doi, I don't like him at all. He has this way of looking at some of the kids that just feels wrong. He seems friendly, but he's always in students' personal space, especially Midoriya when that kid was at the school. I could see how uncomfortable Midoriya was with it, but the poor boy couldn't do anything without getting in trouble. The woman shook her head, wiping away more tears. That man just gives off these bad vibes. I don't know how the principal or the other teachers can stand to be around him, even if they don't have my quirk. Shota raised an eyebrow. She flushed. Sorry, my quirk is called personality. It lets me kind of feel out people's personalities. Nashi seems so fake to me that I don't know why the others don't see it either. But the principal won't hear a word of it, saying that Nashi was a great teacher. For him I get the feeling of arrogance, conceit and other such traits. For you I get the feeling of caring and strictness. Shota tilted his head in acknowledgement to what her quirk sensed. I see, thank you for your time. This helps my investigation a lot. Investigation? Shota let his lip curl up, a mockery of a smile. I am a pro-hero. If I didn't recognize the signs of bullying and abuse going on in my student, then I wouldn't be a very good hero. He stood up and gave the woman a small bow, leaving down his work number. If you think of anything else that might help, please let me know. She nodded and took the number. Shota left and walked towards his and Hizashi's house, knowing that his husband would not be pleased by what he found out, and his suspicions regarding the previous English teacher. He walked down the streets seeing the people go about their daily business. After a half-hour he made it home. Music was playing, a gentle song, something unintrusive. Hizashi was in a thoughtful mood it seemed. Shota wondered how his talk with All Might had gone. Hizashi's talk with All Might had been a bust. The man hadn't realized anything was going on with Midoriya, had truly bought into the kid's excuse about the gifts being for appreciation, but at least All Might had managed to get the boy to stop, somehow managing it without hurting the kid's feelings. So now he was waiting for his husband to come home from meeting with the teachers. Still, that gave him quite some time to think about the little listener. The poor kid. Hizashi hoped they could help the kid gain some confidence, and possibly get him away from that walking corpse of a woman. The door opened to his office and Shota collapsed into the other chair, a scowl on his face. Hizashi tapped the controls for the music, pausing it. No, put on something calming. Shota mumbled. Hizashi smirked, but did, lowering the volume a bit so it was more of a background noise. So, I take it that things are bad? Worse. Hizashi froze. Worse? As we suspected, the teachers at Alderaan High have been letting the bullying happen. The gifts Midoriya gives are so the teachers grade him fairly. He gave a nod. That was what they were expecting, that was the bad, so how could it be worse? Shota raised his hands, physically rubbing at his head. I have reason to believe that one of Midoriya's teachers is a Pefli. Hizashi paled. No, not the little listener. It was the English teacher, Shota stated bluntly. And Hizashi lost all color as he dropped down. No wonder the little listener is so scared of me. Zashi, go to Alderaan's website and look at the picture for Nashidoi. Reluctantly, he did so, knowing that he won't like what he finds. Then he stared at a picture of the man, blonde hair, yellow snake-like eyes, and a build similar to his own. That is the English teacher. Well, Hizashi cursed. Shota gave a nod. You're going to have to avoid touching Midoriya at all until we can build some trust between you two. If my suspicions are correct, then any touch will either send him into a panic attack or have him disassociating. All right, he agreed, feeling helpless. Poor Midoriya, to have possibly suffered through all that and had no one to talk to. Because it was obvious he couldn't talk to that walking corpse of a mother he had. I think I'm going to join you on your patrols tonight. I'm not going to get any sleep, Hizashi muttered, wanting to punch something. Shota gave a nod, getting up and walking over to him before dramatically collapsing onto his lap. Hizashi snorted and shifted them so they would be more comfortable. His husband curled up on him. We'll help the kiddo, he murmured quietly. He's going to need therapy. And I still need to sign him up for quirk counseling. After USJ tomorrow you can speak to him about the quirk counseling. Hound Dog does both, so for now we can have quirk counseling sessions that double as therapy, Hizashi determined. That's actually a decent plan, Shota teased, smiling at him with that crooked grin of his. Hey, I'll have you know all my plans are great. Shota snorted. Like that one plan of yours to replace Namuri's closet with nothing by granny clothes? Hizashi shuddered. Why must you keep reminding me of that? He whined. Because I love to remind you of how much your plans SEK, Shota responded dryly. So mean. Shota leaned up and kissed him, rolling his eyes fondly. The two fell silent as Shota opened the laptop and started typing up the new notes on the investigation document. Hizashi stared at his husband who laid on the bed wounded, covered in bandages. The steady beeping was the only thing letting him know that Shota was alive. Recovery Girl could only heal him part of the way, such was the damage he received. Over in the other beds were Midoriya and All Might. The only one awake was All Might, who stared at Midoriya with an unreadable expression. Out of all 20 students, only Midoriya was critically wounded. The boy who suffered through so much threw himself in front of All Might to buy the man a few more seconds. For just a couple seconds the villain's hand had grazed Midoriya's chest before Snipe managed to shoot the hand away and the villains fled. On top of that the kid had broken both his legs and mangled one of his fingers. You're good to go, All Might, Shizenji informed the man after she checked him over. He nodded and with one last glance towards Midoriya the man left. Shizenji sighed. Those two are so reckless. Hizashi just hummed in acknowledgement, keeping vigil from next to Shota's bed. The nurse huffed. He's not going to wake up anytime soon, go get yourself some sleep. He looked up to her and wordlessly shook his head. He's going to need you in top shape when he wakes up. I'm staying here. Then sleep on one of the beds here, just get some sleep or I will call Namuri on you. Reluctantly he nodded and moved away to one of the other beds, laying down and eventually falling asleep to the steady beeping that came from the heart monitors. The first thing he was aware of was pain, everything hurt, and his chest itched. He raised an arm up trying to scratch at it. You shouldn't do that, little listener, you'll aggravate your wounds, a tired voice stated. His eyes opened, and he heard the beeping pick up pace. I'm staying right here, I won't move closer to you without your permission, but you need to calm down, take deep breaths. You're in the nurse's office after you got injured. Izuku stared at where Mike Sensei sat, In a chair next to a mummy-looking man with black hair, Zawasan he cut off with a small cough, his throat feeling dry. He's alive, sleeping and healing. Do you want me to get you some water? Weiss, he croaked out. Mike-sensei kept his movements slow as he got up and went over to a water dispenser and grabbed one of those little paper cups. He filled it with water and started coming closer. I need to get closer to you to hand over the water, is that all right? Izuku paused for a moment, before slowly giving a nod, wincing as his head throbbed in protest. The English teacher came closer and Izuku stared at the green ringed eyes, focusing on them and not the man's blonde hair or tall lanky build. Mike-sensei came closer and handed him the water before backing away. He drank the water rapidly, bringing relief to a bit of irritation, though his chest still itched and he could feel his body pulsating in pain. What happened? He questioned. The villains fled, but not before wounding you pretty badly, little listener. Aizawa-sensei will live? He asked, wanting to double-check. Yeah, Shota's a fighter. I bet that he will be back in class Friday. Tomorrow classes are cancelled. He gave a hesitant nod, his eyes looking over towards his homeroom teacher, heart twisting as he remembered how Aizawa had jumped straight into the fray, despite it not being his style, how his teacher had brought down his goggles and told them, no hero is a one-trick pony. Izuku didn't even have one trick that he could use without breaking his bones. He was useless as a hero. Maybe Kacchan was right and he should just quit. Little listener? Mike-sensei's voice brought his attention away from his thoughts, and he looked up at the teacher, who had his normally styled hair down and wasn't wearing his hero uniform. Weiss, he stuttered. You did a good job. I heard the reports from the students. You were very brave, and came up with several good plans that helped protect your classmates. Though, next time try and think of a plan that doesn't end up with you breaking bones. All right. Izuku frowned, but nodded to the teacher, wondering why the English teacher didn't want him to hurt himself. Why was Mike-sensei staying away while asking for permission to get closer? He wasn't that way with the rest of the students. He watched the blonde teacher as the man returned to Aizawa's side. You should try and get some more sleep, little listener. Izuku nodded. Despite knowing he wouldn't be able to get any sleep with Mike-sensei in the room, he didn't feel comfortable in the man's presence. Which meant that an hour later, when Aizawa's heart monitor picked up, he was wide awake. Though Mike-sensei seemed to have fallen asleep, sitting in the chair with his head at an awkward angle. He bit his lip. The man obviously was here for Aizawa-sensei, and he knew the English teacher would want to talk with Aizawa when he woke up. Mike-sensei? Izuku hesitantly called out. The teacher's eyes opened. Yeah? The man groggily questioned. Aizawa-sensei's heart monitor picked up. The man blinked, rubbing his eyes and then giving a wide grin, thanks. Which he apparently said too loudly as Aizawa groaned, shut up, Zashi. Sorry, Mike-sensei whispered. Do you need some water? Yes. Mike-sensei got up and filled a paper cup with water before helping Aizawa to drink it, carefully shifting the bandages that were on his face. Are the students all right? Aizawa questioned. Present Mike huffed. All of them are alive, and only Midoriya was critically wounded. He's awake in the room with us right now. Aizawa gave a grunt in response. Midoriya? Waya-sensei? We're getting you to quirk counseling sessions with Hound Dog. What? Izuku questioned, confused as to where this was coming from. Mike-sensei rolled his eyes. He was planning to tell you after the USJ rescue training. It is after the USJ training, Aizawa deadpanned. Izuku watched as the English teacher face-bombed. Really, Sho? He questioned. How bad are the injuries? Mike-sensei told him of the injuries Aizawa-sensei and 13 had received, how 13 was at a special facility due to the nature of their body. Then the English teacher told Aizawa the injuries that Izuku had. The homeroom teacher remained quiet for a moment. Have you gotten any sleep, Zashi? Yes, Mike-sensei answered quickly. Right? Aizawa commented dryly. I have. I was sleeping right here, the English teacher said. Go home, get some real sleep. Bring me a coffee in the morning or a jelly packet, Aizawa-sensei muttered tiredly. But Hizashi, Aizawa interrupted, reaching out blindly, and Mike-sensei raised his hand to Aizawa's. I'll be right here, I'm alive. Mike-sensei huffed. All right, I'll go. The chair squeaked as Mike-sensei stood up. He started walking out. "Zashi, I love you," Aizawa muttered. "I love you too, Sho. Get some rest, I'll be back in the morning," Mike-sensei said, his face softening as a small smile came before he left. "I would prefer if you kept our relationship to yourself, Midoriya," Aizawa said flatly. I won't tell anyone," he answered. Silence fell for a moment. "Sensei?" Izuku hesitantly called out after a few minutes. Aizawa hummed, showing he was still awake. Does Mike-sensei not like me?" Izuku asked. "He does like you, but we're pro-heroes. He can tell that his presence upsets you, so he is keeping his distance," Aizawa answered. "Oh," Izuku replied, not knowing what to say to that. "Do you want to speak about why his presence upsets you?" Aizawa asked, his voice gruff, but tone soft. Izuku hesitated for a moment. "He reminds me of my previous English teacher." "Would you be comfortable telling me, or someone else, about how the English teacher treated you?" How?" Izuku stammered, not quite understanding how Aizawa-sensei would know that the teacher hadn't treated him like a normal student. "Pro-hero kid, it's our job to recognize when something's wrong. You don't have to talk about it now, but just keep in mind that you can speak to any of us teachers. We care, Midoriya." Izuku flinched at that. He never had teachers that cared before. And maybe Aizawa cared, but he couldn't be sure about the other teachers, having not interacted with them as much. Then again, it could just be because he had a quirk now that the teachers actually cares. Aizawa had been there the other day after the battle simulation, even though he could have continued watching the other students. And then after the media had crowded him, the man had offered to let him skip homeroom if he couldn't face his schoolmates. Maybe it would be okay to trust Aizawa-sensei. "I'll think about it," he whispered out. "That's all I ask, let's get some sleep, kiddo." Izuku didn't reply, and one apparently wasn't needed as Aizawa-sensei fell silent. A couple minutes later and the heart monitor slowed down a bit. It took Izuku longer to fall asleep. But eventually he managed to sleep again. The next he woke up, it was to Recovery Girl's voice, scolding someone. Opening his eyes, he saw that it was now morning, and the office was light up. He coughed, gaining the attention of the nurse as she came over to him, bringing a cup of water as she started lecturing him instead. Aizawa was sitting up, and Mike-sensei was sitting in the chair next to the bed, holding a plate of food that he seemed to be slowly feeding the black-haired teacher. "This is stupid," Aizawa grumbled. "Your arms need time to heal, Sho." "It's not stupid. Now open your mouth before I force it open," Mike-sensei stated, his smile turning mischievous. Aizawa sighed and opened his mouth. Izuku couldn't help but giggle at the scene, though he could still feel his teacher glaring at him, even if he couldn't see the man's eyes at the moment. Mike-sensei turned and gave a wink towards Izuku, who hesitantly grinned back. Maybe Mike-sensei wasn't like his previous English teacher. "Shizenji, I have another bento in the bag for the little listener." Recovery Girl looked at him for a moment before nodding and grabbing the bento and handing it over to Izuku after helping him sit up. "Do you need help, dearie?" the woman asked, gesturing to his bandaged hand. "Am I alright? Hand is still good?" She smiled and Izuku started to eat. After finishing, he looked at Mike-sensei and Aizawa, who were just sitting together, holding hands. He met Mike-sensei's eyes and worked on his courage to say, "Thank you for the bento." "Of course. It was no trouble, little listener," the man said, giving a large smile and a thumbs up. After an hour, Recovery Girl said visitors were coming, and Mike-sensei drew the curtains around the bed, hiding the two teachers from sight. Uraraka and Ida came in, asking him if he was okay. They stayed for a little while before leaving. Around lunchtime, All Might came in, bringing in lunch. "How are you holding up, young Midoriya?" "I'm doing all right," he said, smiling at his mentor in gratitude as he started to eat while they conversed. "That's good." The man looked at the curtains that were still drawn. "I suppose Aizawa is using this to get in some good sleep." Izuku shrugged. Mike-sensei hadn't appeared from the curtains, so the two were still in there together, but he hadn't heard them in an hour or so. "I have to say, it was very reckless of you to step in like you did. But, thank you, if it wasn't for you I would probably be in even worse shape, as it is my limit has been shortened once again." He looked down, his eyes filling with tears. Hey, none of that, young Midoriya, you did the best you could, we still have to figure out how to regulate your quirk. Aizawa-sensei said that IW would be taking quirk counseling with Hound Dog. All Might nodded, rubbing his chin. I see, did he mention when your first session is? Izuku shook his head, pushing away the now empty bento. Let me think about it, I might know someone better who can help, I'll give them a call and see what he has to say. Okay. Izuku agreed with a nod. You should get some more rest, young Midoriya, All Might said, reaching over before pausing. May I ruffle your hair, my boy? Yes, Izuku said quickly, smiling a bit as All Might ruffled his hair. His mentor had figured out by the 6th month mark that Izuku preferred to be asked for permission to touch him, otherwise he would flinch away. I'll visit you later. Get some rest. With that, All Might left the room. Izuku must have drifted off, as next he woke it was to Recovery Girl shaking him awake, which caused him to back away before he was properly awake. She told him that it was time for dinner and handed him the meal. He gave a thanks, before starting to eat it, looking up to see that the curtain around Aizawa's bed was open again and that a present Mike was once more helping the other to eat. It was a minute before he realized that there was some music quietly playing, coming from where Mike-sensei sat. It wasn't something he heard before, but it was relaxing. Just a gentle melody. He kinda wished it was a bit louder though so he could hear it better. But he wasn't going to ask the English teacher. Still, he found himself not being quite so tense in the presence of the blonde teacher. He finished eating and found himself lying on the bed, bored. Recovery Girl came back out and unwrapped the bandages on his chest, and Izuku caught the first glimpse of the creeping wound he had right above his heart. It was still fairly wounded. The nurse saw his confused look. The decay had started digging deeper. It managed to eat away at the muscles and part of your rib cage that protected your heart. If the contact had been any longer, it may have managed to reach your heart. She informed him clinically. I already used a lot of your stamina to heal you, so you will have to let the rest of it heal naturally. Same as Aizawa over there. These types of wounds just require too much stamina to fully heal. Wouldn't stamina recover? Yes, but this type of stamina isn't just something you can recover with a short nap. It's more akin to your life force, and my healing eats up part of it to speed up the natural healing process. With time your life force can recover, but a bunch of injuries or a major injury will take out a huge chunk of your life force. When you get released you cannot break any more of your bones. If you do I won't be able to heal it. So be careful or you could lose the use of that limb. Izuku nodded, repeating the words in his head. Break a bone and lose that limb. She carefully disinfected the wound and then wrapped his chest back up, removing the heart monitor as she did so before directing him to get some more sleep. Then she went over to Aizawa-sensei, unwrapping the bandages around his head after telling him to close his eyes. Izuku took in a sharp breath seeing how black and purple the face was. It completely bruised, except one part underneath his eye that looked cut. Recovery Girl carefully wiped some disinfectant on the wounds and put on some clean bandages, also removing his heart monitor. Then she walked out of the room, towards her personal room. A beeping came from across the room and Mike-sensei looked down at his phone, grumbling. Go to your show, Hizashi, Aizawa-sensei said. Present Mike sighed. I'll be back tomorrow morning with breakfast for you and the little listener. Of course, I'll see you then. Mike-sensei started to walk out. Turning he smiled at Aizawa. Love you, show. I love you too, you goof. Now get going. The English teacher chuckled and walked out. About 10 minutes passed before Aizawa sighed and spoke up. Can you put on Hizashi's radio show? Oh, of course, Izuku replied, pulling out his phone and opening the radio app for Present Mix Put Your Hands Up station. Some music was playing and after 30 minutes, when the clock hit 7 p.m., Mike-sensei's voice came on. What's up, listeners? How has everybody's days been doing? Present Mike started, cheerfully talking about different subjects. The hour passed and music started to play. Izuku left it on, though lowered the volume a bit so it wouldn't disturb Aizawa-sensei. Soon he ended up drifting off. Good morning. A loud voice woke him up with a start. Not so loud, Aizawa groaned. Izuku gave out a groan of agreement, trying to fall back asleep, but he couldn't. He heard snickering. but I have coffee for you show. Gimme, Aizawa muttered. Izuku sat up, rubbing the sleep out of his eyes. He blinked and saw Mike holding the cup and straw in place as Aizawa sipped it. After a minute, Mike took the cup away. Let me give the little listener his breakfast, then you can have the rest of your beverage. Izuku watched silently as Mike-sensei pulled out a bento and paused looking at him. Can I come closer? Why yes. Walked closer and handed over the bento. If you want something to drink, let me know and I'll get it for you, okay kiddo? He hesitated, he looked at the water machine, the teacher saw the glance. You want me to get you some water? Izuku gave a nod. The English teacher filled up the plastic cup and brought it over. Izuku took it and drinked it down, watching how present Mike returned to Aizawa and helped him drink some more and eat the food, Aizawa complaining about the lack of being able to use his hands. Aizawa had broken arms, and Izuku had one broken leg, though one had apparently mostly healed, having not been as broken. Though as he looked around he spotted a pair of crutches nearby. He went to check his phone, but saw it was dead. What tea time is it? 6:57, Mike-sensei answered, which meant classes would be starting in about another hour and a half. Izuku went back to eating the food. He watched as Mike-sensei finished helping Aizawa eat and the man got up. Now, I expect you to stay here and rest. Don't try going to your classes, understand? Perfectly, Aizawa responded. Izuku saw that Mike-sensei narrowed his eyes. Midoriya, make sure my husband doesn't do anything stupid, yeah? He nodded in response, and the teacher seemed satisfied as he left the room. Izuku and Aizawa looked at each other and Izuku pointed over to the crutches he had spotted. Aizawa snorted and gave a nod. The door opened and Mike-sensei popped back in. Almost forgot my phone. More like you wanted an excuse to make sure I wasn't immediately trying to leave, Aizawa commented. That too, Mike-sensei said, coming to a stop next to Aizawa as he grabbed his phone. Then he leaned down and kissed Aizawa-sensei's bandaged forehead. Take care of yourself. Izuku glanced away, feeling like he was intruding upon something private. And then present Mike walked out again. Aizawa shifted and the two met eyes. Both waited silently for a few minutes to see if Mike would come back in. Aizawa slowly sat up. He made it to his feet and leaned against the bed for a minute before taking his first step. Izuku sat up, watching as Aizawa slowly went to the crutches. The teacher carefully maneuvered them to hang on one of his casts before he hobbled back. Izuku grabbed them and carefully stood up, figuring out how to use them. Shall we make our escape then, sensei? Izuku questioned with a grin. Aizawa gave a snort and a nod. They got to the door and Aizawa paused. Peek your head out, Hizashi might be waiting outside. Izuku nodded, opening the door a crack and looking out. It's clear, he said quietly. Good, let's go. The two started to make their way through the hall, having to pause frequently for them to catch their breaths. What do you think you two are doing? The displeased voice of Recovery Girl came from behind them. DMN, Aizawa muttered quietly. They both turned around to see the nurse glaring at them. Back to the hospital wing you two. Izuku dejectedly started to walk back, Aizawa next to him. They sat down on the beds and Recovery Girl remained in the room for another hour before her office phone rang. You both stay right here or else, she stated, leaving the room and the door swung shut behind her. Both of the patients immediately started moving again. Izuku grabbed the crutches that had been left next to his bed instead of moved further away. Aizawa went to the door, managing to open it. Izuku followed right behind him as the two moved as quickly as they could, this time making progress more quickly as both wanted to be in the class before Recovery Girl's call was done. Izuku looked around the corner and saw Mike-sensei in the distance. Hide! He hissed and the two ducked into the nearest classroom. Izuku watched the window of the door and after a minute saw present Mike walk past. Good job, Aizawa told him, nodding his head once. Izuku grinned. A light warm feeling spreading through his chest. They waited a minute before the two exited the empty classroom and continued through the hallways, though their progress became slow when the students started coming in. After a bit the students stopped coming in so much and it was time for the classes to start. And Izuku and Aizawa had made it to the door. Izuku opened it, holding it open for Aizawa who walked in. Morning, Aizawa greeted. You're back already, sensei? Izuku came in, letting the door close behind him. Midoriya, you're here as well? Are you two okay to be here? Izuku hobbled his way over to his seat, which was now far away from Bakugo, which was good cause he was sure the blonde would have tripped him. My welfare isn't important, because your fight is far from over. And more villains? Mineta exclaimed in a frantic tone. UA's sports festival is fast approaching. Aizawa told them. That's so ordinary. Kaminari exclaimed. Come on, we just had that villain attack. You sure about this? It's necessary to demonstrate that UA's crisis management protocols are sound. That's the thinking, apparently. Compared to the past years, there'll be 5 times the police presence. Anyhow, our sports festival is the greatest opportunity you'll get. Izuku heard Mineta complain about it, wondering why it just couldn't be cancelled. Our sports festival is one of Japan's biggest events. The Olympics were once the world's sports festival. The whole country would be whipped into a frenzy over them. But as you know, that tradition has shrunk in scale to as shell of its former self after quirks developed. And as far as Japan's concerned, what's taken the place of the Olympics is the UA Sports Festival. The nation's top heroes will all be watching, right? Yaoyorozu questioned. They'll be there as scouts. They'll be looking to hire us as sidekicks after we graduate. That's how upcoming heroes gain their reputation enough to go solo. And a lot of those sidekicks never manage to go solo. They're sidekicks forever. That'll be you. Kaminari, you dunce. Jairu stated. That's so mean. Kaminari responded. Narutali, you'll gain valuable experience and popularity if you're picked up by a big-name hero. But your time is limited. Show the pros what you're made of here and you'll make futures for yourselves. This happens once a year, so you've got 3 chances. If you're hoping to become a hero, this is an event you can't miss. With that, the bell rang for homeroom to be over and the door opened, letting Mike-sensei in. Izuku saw the man narrow his eyes from behind his glasses and Aizawa walked past, pausing slightly as he passed Mike-sensei, and he saw the English teacher's lips moving, though whatever was being said was too quiet. The quick interaction passed and Aizawa-sensei left. Mike-sensei took up the podium and looked at all of them, his gaze pausing on him, and Izuku saw the man's eyes closed for a moment and he shook his head before he continued, the whole thing unnoticed by the other students as he spoke, going over an English lesson. The class ended and Mike-sensei started to head out, but paused, looking at him, green eyes peeking above his sunglasses. Midoriya, after lunch, returned to the nurse's office. He nodded in response, sinking down into his seat as the students looked at him. Midoriya, did you sneak out of the nurse's office? Ida questioned. So manly, Kirishima said, giving him a grin. I think he was more hobbling than sneaking out, one of the other students commented, a guy who shot tape from his elbows if Izuku remembered correctly. Ectoplasm came in next and the next few PRDS passed quickly. After Cementas's literature class, they went off to lunch. Ida and Uraraka walked beside him, despite his slow pace. They entered the lunchroom and they told him to sit and that they would bring lunch to him. A few minutes later they came back with 3 trays. He ate, listening as Uraraka and Ida discussed her reasons for becoming a hero. Lunch ended and he started to hobble his way towards the nurse's wing, telling Uraraka and Ida that he could manage it on his own. It took him about 10 minutes, but he made it and entered the room. Seeing Mike-sensei standing above Aizawa's bed, the teacher was already on it and seemed to be getting lectured by the English teacher. Are you even listening to me, Sho? Mike-sensei asked. I am. Then why did you feel the need to leave after I asked you to stay and rest? Izuku listened to the conversation as he made his way to the bed, wincing as he hit his injured leg when he pushed himself onto the bed. I needed to tell my class about the sports festival. You could have done that Monday. Mike-sensei huffed. Why are you so stubborn? Because if I wasn't stubborn then I would likely be dead, Aizawa replied, rolling his eyes, the only visible part of his face. The English teacher groaned, going quiet for a moment as he pinched his nose before removing his glasses and turning towards him. And what's your reason for leaving? Midoriya? He didn't want to be alone. Aizawa-sensei felt safe. He wanted to make sure his classmates were all right. He didn't like being in the nurse's office, didn't like the silence or how empty it felt. He said none of this, instead he just shrugged, knowing he wouldn't be able to say any of that. Mike-sensei looked him in the eyes, and maybe he found an answer because he just sighed and turned back to Aizawa. I swear, you're going to give me gray hair from worry. But you love me anyways. I really do. Now you two should rest up. If you leave the bed for any reason other than the bathroom, I won't let either of you return to class on Monday. Izuku blinked. Huh? Mike-sensei grinned at him. I can't have you getting into trouble, kiddo, so stay here and keep my stubborn husband company. Just get out of here so I can start telling Midoriya embarrassing stories about you, Aizawa grumbled. Show, Mike-sensei whined. Either I tell embarrassing stories, or we leave and go pull a vanishing act until Monday. Izuku blinked, wondering why he was being included, but, then again, embarrassing stories about Mike-sensei sounded fun. I vote F for S stories, he stammered out after gathering up some bravery. Aizawa nodded. We would pull a vanishing act, and I would still tell embarrassing stories. The English teacher gave a dramatic sniff. I see how it is, fine, I'll leave. He was halfway out the door when he paused. Make sure to tell the little listener about the hair dye incident in our second year. Aizawa snorted. I will, now scram. Present Mike chuckled and walked out. Hizashi smiled at the sight of the little listener laughing in pure joy, and Shota was snickering. It had been a few hours since he left, and he hoped that his husband hadn't just told embarrassing stories of him. Nemuri and Tensei had some highly embarrassing moments as well. It took a moment, but finally Midoriya noticed him. The boy quieted down a bit, but didn't instantly become nervous, which was a huge improvement. It seemed the boy was starting to realize that Hizashi wasn't like his previous English teacher. Hizashi had also noticed that the boy liked to see his eyes, perhaps because it was one of the most noticeable differences between him and that other English teacher. So he had already changed into his civilian wear, hair tied back into a loose bun. He looked at his husband, who gave a small nod, scooting over to make room on the hospital bed. He beamed, giving finger guns to his husband as he went over and sat down next to him. Using their relationship to help put Midoriya at ease was a brilliant plan from Shota. And it was working. Midoriya no longer flinched at his mere presence, didn't curl up nearly as much. How are you? He asked. Tired, Shota deadpanned. I brought you and the kiddo a snack, he said smiling. Hizashi saw them look at him, and he pulled out a couple of jelly packets from his pocket. Midoriya, catch, he warned the boy before tossing it. The boy caught it and gave him a hesitant smile. Tea, thank you. He opened the juice packet and held it up for his husband to sip down. Hizashi glanced over to the kid to see him looking at the packet hesitantly. Something wrong, little listener? No. The boy said quickly, shifting a bit. The boy looked him in the eyes and Hizashi kept the gaze, seeing how the boy was working on saying something. I never had one of these before. Shota coughed in disbelief from next to him. You never had a jelly packet? Shota repeated, a slight note of horror in his voice. Hizashi resisted the urge to grin, knowing his husband practically lived off the jelly packets and coffee. And never. Well, go ahead, what flavor did you give him, Zashi? Apple. I'll have to bring the other flavors so Midoriya can try them all and find his favorite, Shota said with a nod, earning a surprised look from Midoriya. Hizashi chuckled. Shota is obsessed with these packets. He considers it a travesty that you haven't had them before. I can speak for myself, you know. Of course, Hizashi agreed, earning a glare from Shota. Midoriya looked at the jelly packet and opened it, carefully lifting it up and taking a sip. He blinked, his eyes widening. It's good, he muttered in surprise. He may not be able to see it, but Hizashi knew his husband was smirking. That they are, Shota agreed, taking another drink of his, finishing it off. Anyways, the school day is over now, so we'll be taking you to your home. Midoriya looked up, tilting his head. But I take the train? Not while you're healing, little listener, Hizashi stated, his eyes meeting Midoriya's again as he said, we don't want to risk something happening to you on the way home. We'll also be picking you up in the mornings to make sure you get to school safely. The kid fell silent, taking another small sip of the jelly packet. Okay, the kid agreed after a moment in a quiet voice. If you don't feel comfortable with us taking you home, I'm sure we can ask All Might or one of the other teachers to take you home, Shota spoke up. YUT2RF fine. Hizashi beamed, giving finger guns at the kid. Are you ready to go home now then, or do you want to stay here a little longer? The kid finished the last of the jelly packet. W can G go. Hizashi nodded, and the three made their way out of the room. He led the kid to his car and opened the door to the passenger seat and back seat for Shota and Midoriya. I never want to have my arms broken again, Shota grumbled. He chuckled. I don't mind, means I get to take care of you. The glare his husband gave was burning, though I do miss that handsome face of yours, he added with a wink. Hizashi! Shoyuta snapped out, and he knew his husband was flustered. He chuckled as he closed the door for Shota and then walked around to the driver's side. He got in and turned on the radio, playing something upbeat that he hummed along with. Seeing how the kid seemed to relax with the music playing. After a half-hour drive, he pulled up at Midoriya's apartment complex. All right, kiddo, we're here. He eyed the building, not seeing an elevator. Does your apartment have an elevator? No. Stairs it is then, he said as he got out, seeing that Midoriya had started to get out as well. The boy sent him a confused look. I'm not letting you walk up the stairs by yourself. What if you trip and fall? Midoriya's eyes widened at that, watering a bit, and Hizashi started to panic before the boy said, Thanks. Now Hizashi was the one confused. You're welcome, he returned hesitantly, not sure what the kid was thanking him for. Midoriya just walked to the stairs, not offering anything to help clarify what he meant. The boy paused at the bottom of the stairs. Is something wrong? How? The boy asked, looking at the stairs and then down to his crutches. Put both of your crutches under one arm and grab the railing with the other. Keep the crutches on the step where you're standing. Then you step up with your stronger leg. He looked and saw the kid paying attention to him, so he continued, push down on your crutches and then step up with your weaker leg. Once both feet are on the same step, bring your crutches up to that step. Rinse and repeat. He watched, standing carefully a step behind the kid and at a bit of an angle as the kid started to walk up the stairs. Luckily the boy's apartment was only on the second floor instead of any higher. Hizashi saw the kid dig through his pocket, pulling out a keychain with a key and a small All Might figurine. The kid pushed the key in before frowning. It's unlocked, the boy mumbled. Midoriya took the key out and opened the door. Hizashi watched as the boy paled a bit. Annie? Aizawa-kun. You're finally here. What took you so long, rascal? A blonde woman appeared at the doorway, almost startling Hizashi as she looked like a female version of Bakugo. The woman looked at Midoriya. Oh, I see. Her head turned. Brat, why the hell didn't you tell me Aizawa-kun was injured? Shut up, you old hag. Bakugo's voice yelled back. Carefully Hizashi reached into one of his pockets and activated the recorder, having a feeling that he was about to have a conversation that Shota would want to hear. The woman moved out of the doorway and Izuku entered. And who the hell are you? The woman asked, turning to him with suspicious eyes. Yamada Hizashi, I'm one of Midoriya's and Bakugo's teachers at UA. Her expression changed and she smiled. Sorry, my name is Bakugo Mitsuki, Katsuki's mother and this rascal's aunt, the woman said, reaching over and ruffling Midoriya's hair, causing him to flinch. She sighed. Really, Aizawa-kun? Sorry, the boy apologized. Hizashi's smile fell a bit at that. May I come in? I need to speak with Mrs. Midoriya about the incident. Mrs. Bakugo frowned, nodding. Of course, but I have to warn you that Inko-chan is, well, disabled. Poor woman. Brat, go bring your aunt into the living room. She screamed into the apartment. Shut up, the boy yelled back, but there was the sound of footsteps from inside. Mrs. Bakugo pointed to one of the seats and then she sat next to Izuku, who shifted, a look of discomfort on his face. The woman sighed. So why are you here in person instead of just calling like the school did for me? Due to Midoriya's injuries, we figured it would be safer to make sure he was accompanied by the school's personnel. We did call Mrs. Midoriya to let her know he was injured and had to stay in the nurse's office overnight for observation. At that moment Bakugo walked in, standing next to the walking corpse that was Midoriya's mother. Her eyes were still empty, and she walked and sat down in one of the chairs. What are you doing here? Bakugo questioned in a contempt-filled tone with narrowed eyes. Respect your teacher, brat. Mrs. Bakugo snapped. Hizashi cleared his throat before Bakugo could respond and started to explain what happened at USJ and how Midoriya got injured to save a teacher's life. Good job, rascal. Mrs. Bakugo praised, patting Midoriya's head, getting another flinch as the boy looked down. If only you were more confident. I'm so sorry, Midoriya apologized. Stop apologizing, you're trying to be a hero, aren't you? Midoriya nodded, still not looking up. Mrs. Bakugo glared. Speak up, have you ever seen a hero who can't speak properly? And no, Midoriya answered, his stuttering worse. Hizashi's smile fell at the sight of the boy who looked like he was trying to escape. His eyes were watering, but Midoriya wasn't letting his tears fall. Excuse me, but what do you think you are doing? Hizashi questioned, his voice icy. The woman looked at him confused, trying to get the rascal to stop being a wimp. Bakugo snorted, Deku will always be a crybaby. Midoriya flinched at that, raising one of his arms to scrub at the tears. What you are doing is not helping him at all, Hizashi started, preparing to go on a rant. And what would you know, huh? A. I am a teacher for teens, I know when a tough love approach is necessary and when a kid needs a different approach. B. I'm a pro-hero, I recognize the signs of trauma which comes from bullying and other such events. C. I'm not the parent of one of Midoriya's main bullies. Midoriya's eyes went wide in surprise, looking at him in a sort of stunned disbelief. The woman looked enraged. Katsuki is not a bully. Hizashi just calmly raised an eyebrow, wearing one of Shota's, are you done yet? Faces. Mrs. Bakugo turned to Izuku, well? Aren't you going to defend Katsuki? I don't need that dim nerd standing up for me. Shut up, brat. Izuku started to say something, but he was stuttering so badly that nothing could be made out. Speak clearly, rascal, Mitsuki scolded Izuku, tugging his ear. The boy's green eyes met his, filled with misery, and Hizashi just wanted to hug the poor kid. He watched as the boy opened and closed his mouth, but nothing came out. You've gone mute again, haven't you? Midoriya nodded, looking ashamed. Go to your room, while I finish this chat with your teacher then. Mrs. Bakugo said, practically spitting out the word teacher as she glared at him. Midoriya stood up and quickly hobbled out of the room on his crutches. Why would you ever insinuate that Katsuki bullies Izuku? Those two are best friends, even if my brat is a bit of an idiot when showing it. Ma'am, were you not informed about the incident that happened at the start of this week? Mrs. Bakugo's anger seemed to fade as confusion replaced it. She frowned. My husband mentioned something about Katsuki having to take anger management lessons, but he didn't tell me the specifics. I see, there was a battle simulation exercise, and Bakugo and Midoriya fought each other. Bakugo nearly killed Midoriya, despite the teacher of the class telling him to stop. Hizashi informed the mother, watching as Bakugo seemed to sink down into his chair a bit. I think I still have the video on my phone if you would like proof. The woman nodded, and Hizashi carefully kept his face blank of the glee he felt. So what if he was maybe a bit biased against Bakugo and wanted to see him get more than the little slap on the wrist the school had decided on? He pulled up the video and showed it to Mitsuki, who paled and then became enraged, before her expression went cold. I see, thank you for bringing this to my attention. Izuku-san, there's a meal in the fridge for you and Inko-chan. The woman hollered into the house as she stood up, one arm tightly gripping Bakugo's. She looked at Inko. I think it's best if I go now, but I'll come visit you again in a couple weeks. Okay, Inko replied, face blank of any emotion. Mrs. Bakugo's gaze turned sad. Hizashi stood up and gave a nod. Thank you for your time. He tried his best to keep his voice even to not show how he felt. The anger that burned at this situation. I'll be saying goodbye to Midoriya and then I will take my leave. Mrs. Bakugo nodded and Hizashi went further into the house, finding a door that had Izuku's name hanging on it. He knocked. A moment later and Izuku opened the door, his cheeks red and puffy and he was wiping away tears. Hey little listener, I'm going to go now, will you be alright? Midoriya nodded. May I ruffle your hair? He asked carefully. The kid hesitated, then gave a nod. Hizashi smiled and gave the hair a quick ruffle. You're a good kid, alright? Don't feel pressured to speak if you don't want to, yeah? Midoriya gave a small shaky smile and a thumbs up. I'll pick you up Monday around 7:45. He got a nod in response. Hizashi shot the kid some finger guns and then headed out, turning off the recorder as he did so. Looking down, he saw the Bakugos getting into a car and driving away. He went to his own car and saw Shota waiting there, staring at the retreating vehicle with narrowed eyes. He got into the driver's seat and sighed, "Poor Midoriya." "What happened?" Shota growled. "Why was Bakugo in Midoriya's house?" "Apparently Mrs. Bakugo is Midoriya's aunt," he said. He started the car and drove towards their house. "I did record it as well. Do you want to wait for the recording or for me to tell you what went down?" "Tell me." So as he drove, he relayed the gist of the conversation. Shota growled by the end of it. "She made him go mute?" "Yeah," she mentioned again, "so it sounds like a common occurrence for him around her." "And was Mrs. Midoriya still a walking corpse?" Shota questioned, using the nickname Hizashi had given her. "Yes." Shota groaned. "This just keeps getting better and better," he muttered sarcastically. Hizashi shook his head. "Nothing we can do about it unless we can get proof that Mrs. Midoriya is mistreating him, but then he would enter the foster system. That would be even worse." "We'll figure something out, Sho." "Yes, we will." Izuku grimaced, trying to cook breakfast while hobbling around on crutches. It took a painstakingly long time, but eventually he managed to cook breakfast. He placed the food down on the table and put a couple pills next to his mother's spot. The medicine was supposed to be helping her get better, and Izuku supposed it was working. She could answer and ask questions now, at least, instead of being completely unresponsive. He made his way to her room, shaking her awake and dragging her to the dining room. Unfortunately, he still didn't feel like talking, his words drying up and getting caught in his throat when he tried to speak. So he resorted to silently leading her to the table. At least she could eat without further prompting once she saw the food. After he finished eating, he led his mom to the living room and put on the TV, putting on the station she used to watch before the accident. It wasn't like she was in the right mind to tell him what she wanted to watch, especially right now when he couldn't ask her. He returned to the dining room and started cleaning up the dishes. Then he went to his room and opened his notebooks, editing a few of the student pages he had written. Eventually his thoughts drifted to Aizawa-sensei and Mike-sensei. The homeroom teacher was different from any other teacher he had before. He treated everyone in the class fairly equally, though he was a bit harsher on those he claimed were close to zero potential. Such a case being Mineta. Then there was Mike-sensei, who didn't call on him in class, kept his distance outside of class without making sure it was okay with him, and in class had Ida pass out papers so he wouldn't intrude on Izuku's comfort zone. He had thought that maybe Mike-sensei didn't like him, but Aizawa had said, "He does like you, but we're pro-heroes. He can tell that his presence upsets you, so he is keeping his distance." How Aizawa had told him that they cared. And Izuku supposed that he should have expected Yue to be different. After all, he had a quirk now. He wasn't worthless. That was another thing that he had almost forgotten about. Apparently he had some undetermined quirk. He had no idea what it actually was, and hadn't had a chance to talk with Recovery Girl about it. Or even inform All Might. Recovery Girl did tell him that she had done the scan at Aizawa's insistence, that the teacher had been trying to figure out why his file originally said Quirkless when it should have just been undetermined. Was wondering why they hadn't paid to hire a testing specialist who could help them find out what the quirk was. What hidden requirements it had. Still, he didn't know what his real quirk could have been. Izuku pulled out his phone and fiddled for a moment, then typed up a message. Recovery Girl did a scan of my foot. Apparently I don't actually have the double pinky joint that I was told I had. All Might didn't respond immediately. In fact, it was almost an hour later when Izuku did finally get a response to his text. Really? That's good news then, right? I guess. I don't know what my actual quirk would be though. Once you get a handle on OFA, then we should see about finding out your original quirk. If it hasn't activated yet, I suppose we don't have to worry about it activating for now. But you should be careful. OFA makes original quirks more powerful, enhancing their natural ability. Alright. See you Monday. See you then, young Midoriya. Izuku deleted the messages, getting rid of the mentions of one for all. He frowned. He knew it was better to focus on one for all, so he wouldn't break his bones, but he still wanted to know what his quirk was. Izuku closed his eyes. He needed to focus on one for all. After all, if he hurt himself again, Recovery Girl said he could permanently lose use of his limbs. But how could he use it without breaking his bones? Aizawa said that he would set up a meeting with Hound Dog. But All Might said he would find someone else, maybe someone who had helped him before? Izuku sighed. He was bored. He couldn't wait for the weekend to be over. The day passed in a crawl, his only company his thoughts. Shota growled as he finally listened to the recording of Hisashi's conversation with Mrs. Bakugo, and how everything went down. It was frustrating that Midoriya had to deal with such people who didn't think about how their words and actions could make a situation worse. Yet, he was also annoyed at All Might. The man had lied to Hisashi when his husband had asked the man if he knew what was wrong with Midoriya. After all, they had overheard the conversation the symbol of peace had with their student. If it hadn't been blaringly obvious before that All Might was an idiot, it was driven home when the man had said he would be looking into someone other than Hound Dog. Why would All Might not want a certified pro who was also easily available to help Midoriya? But the real kicker was when they heard All Might ask for Midoriya's permission to ruffle his hair, which meant the man at least knew that Midoriya hated being touched, but All Might didn't tell them that. They as teachers should have been made aware, even without them asking. But they had asked, and All Might hadn't told them. Shota huffed as he stopped his pacing and sat down, glaring at the TV. He couldn't even grade the papers right now with his arms out of commission. Nor could he go patrolling, or follow up the other lead on Doinashi. It was frustrating, and he ended up getting back up and starting to pace around again. Hisashi shook his head. You think you would be happy not having to grade? Normally yes, but not when it's the only thing keeping me distracted from Midoriya's situation. Hisashi sighed. We're doing all we can at the moment. Just relax, Sho. Get yourself plenty of rest, and then you can heal up faster. Shota sighed. Why did the time seem to be dragging on and on? Izuku wrote a note and handed it to his mom with breakfast, informing her that he was going to Dagoba Beach for a little bit. She didn't give any sign after she read it, but he didn't expect her to. He probably could leave and she wouldn't even notice, but it put his mind at ease to inform her. Izuku grabbed his backpack, which had a bento and one of his journals in it. He exited the house and carefully made his way down the stairs. Once he was down, he slowly made his way to the beach, seeing All Might standing in his true form. Young Midoriya, his mentor called. Izuku shifted his crutch to be underneath his other arm as he raised a hand waving back. All Might closed the distance between the two of them. Once the man had got within a few feet, Izuku gave a sheepish look and pointed at his throat. You injured your vocal cords again? He nodded and All Might sighed. You really need to take better care of yourself, my boy. Anyways, I asked you here because I got in contact with someone who can help you master one for all. Izuku looked up, tilting his head. He's waiting for us at a nearby warehouse he rented for the day. The two made their way to the warehouse and Izuku entered after All Might. Finally, an older male voice grouched, What took you so long? Sorry, Torino-sensei, All Might apologized. So where is this successor of yours? All Might stepped to the side, revealing him. I'm afraid that besides the obvious injuries, young Midoriya also has hurt his vocal cords and can't speak right now. But, Grand Tornino, meet Izuku Midoriya. Midoriya, Grand Torino, All Might said, introducing the two of them. The man was short and wore a white and yellow hero outfit. You don't look like much, boy, but Tashinori here did tell me what all you've accomplished so far. So, you have trouble regulating one for all? Izuku nodded. Alright, is there any amount of one for all you can safely bring out without breaking your bones? Izuku shook his head. This will be a bit slower, but write down what you know about one for all. How you use it, what you feel and think about. Izuku grabbed the papers and pencil from Gran Torino. Then he started to write, and write, and write. Izuku had a ton of thoughts and speculations on OFA. Gran Torino blinked as Izuku turned the page. All Might chuckled. Young Midoriya loves analyzing things, so this might be a while. A half hour and a few pages later he was finished writing most of his thoughts on one for all. and included how he used it and what he felt. He handed the papers over to Gran Torino, who read over them. "Well, I see the problem, kid. You're thinking one for all is more special than it is. It's just a quirk, kid." Izuku blinked, frowning a bit. He reached into his backpack and pulled out his journal, opening it up to a random page, Kamui Woods. He showed it to Gran Torino. The man read over the pages, his eyebrows shooting up. "So that's just how you see quirks then, huh, kid?" Izuku nodded. "Well, even if you think about it like that, one for all is just a stockpile quirk. It has power from previous wielders that can be distributed to parts of your body. But, as you know, channeling too much of the power to one limb shatters your bones. You need to learn how to control that power, to not send out so much." He knew that, he just didn't know how. That whole egg in the microwave metaphor wasn't really working out. The old man sighed. "When you use one for all, you said you sent it to the parts of the body where you needed it. Have you tried distributing it throughout your body?" Izuku's mouth fell open, and now he felt dumb. If it really was that simple, he could channel an amount he would normally send to his arm and then distribute that amount to his whole body, lessening the amount in total to less than the 100%. Still, if he were to do that, he would have to be careful. But he couldn't test it now, he would have to wait until he was healed. Izuku didn't even know if he would be healed in time to take part in the sports festival. "The UA Sports Festival is coming up. I better not see you breaking any bones, and you're interning with me during internships." Izuku's eyebrows scrunched together, and he tilted his head. He thought back to what Aizawa-sensei had said and realized that the man had hinted at the internships, speaking how important the sports festival was. "Ah, your teacher hasn't told you about internships yet, have they?" Izuku shook his head. "A bunch of pros look at kids during the festival and offer internships if a kid makes a good showing. Those who don't make a good showing have to pick from a list of places that are open to everyone. You won't have to worry about it since you're going to be interning with me." "Well, we can't get much training done since you're healing, so I'll see you again after the sports festival." With that, the old man walked out of the warehouse. "Well, that went better than I expected," All Might muttered. Izuku tilted his head. "I didn't think my old teacher would be so straightforward. Usually he just likes sparing until I figure out an answer, but I suppose that option wasn't available with you being injured." Well, perhaps it wasn't so bad he was injured then, if it meant he wasn't being beat up by an old man that had All Might trembling. He pulled out his bento, eating a lunch with All Might, and then his mentor walked him back to his apartment. "Take care, young Midoriya," All Might said, giving a nod as Izuku entered his apartment. He gave a thumbs up and a smile. Now, Izuku had the rest of Sunday to pass in boredom. He sighed and started thinking about one for all and how he could distribute a portion of it through his body without hopefully breaking every bone in his body. Izuku really wanted to try it again, but he knew he couldn't. Not until he was healed. At least the weekend had been somewhat productive. Izuku was eating breakfast when the knock at the door came. He looked at the time, it was only 7. He went to the door and opened it, seeing Mike-sensei. "Hey little listener. How are you today?" The English teacher asked, giving a smile, green eyes bright. He shrugged, giving a so-so gesture. "Still not feeling up to speaking?" Izuku nodded. He had hoped that he could speak again by the end of the weekend, but it wasn't to be. The words still wouldn't come. "That's fine. Anyways, we accidentally arrived a bit early, so I just wanted to let you know, if you're ready we can head out." He held up a finger. "You want me to wait a moment?" Izuku nodded. "All right, I'll wait right here then," Mike-sensei agreed. He returned to his room and grabbed his bag, slinging it on his shoulder. The bag had his school supplies, and the small gifts he had for each of his teachers. Then he grabbed his tie and grimaced as he tried to remember how to tie it. The video he watched had been confusing. He huffed as he ended up with a messy result. Oh well. Exiting out of his room, he made his way to the front door and stepped out after giving a small hug to his mom, who made no move to return the gesture. Present Mike was leaning against the railing, on his phone. The man looked up, green eyes peering through the clear glasses as the teacher was in his civilian wear. "Ready?" Izuku nodded and headed down the stairs. Mike smiled and stayed close by as he made his way down the stairs. He found himself a bit better about being around Mike-sensei. The man wasn't like his previous English teacher at all. Izuku opened the backseat door and sat down. Aizawa met his eyes through the mirror. Good morning, Midoriya. Izuku nodded and present Mike slid into the driver's seat. Midoriya still doesn't feel like talking. Ah, Aizawa commented, do you know sign language, Midoriya? He shook his head. We can see about teaching you sometime if you want, the homeroom teacher commented. After a short drive they arrived at UA and Izuku opened his door and got out while Mike-sensei went and opened the door for Aizawa-sensei. Zashi, did you give Midoriya the new jelly packet? No, I forgot, thanks for the reminder show. Mike-sensei said, digging into a bag and pulling out a jelly packet. Here, little listener, one grape-flavored packet courtesy of my dorky husband. Izuku took the jelly packet, putting it in his pocket so he could use the crutches to walk. I'm not a dork, you are? No, you. Aizawa narrowed his eyes, lips pursed. I will not delve in a childish argument with you. Mike-sensei stuck his tongue out. Come on, babe, you know you love my childish self. His homeroom teacher rolled his eyes, like a fungus. But that's so mean, show, Mike whined. Come along, Midoriya, we have class to get to, Aizawa said, walking away from Mike who kept pouting. Izuku followed after the teacher, but glanced over his shoulder and saw the sappy face Mike-sensei was pulling. The man caught his gaze and smiled, giving finger guns. Soon they were in class, the first to arrive as the starting bell wouldn't ring for another 20 or so minutes. Midoriya, do you want me to inform the class of your selective mutism? Izuku shook his head, even as he wondered what selective mutism meant. He never heard the term before, and when he could he would have to ask Aizawa-sensei about it. He dug into his bag and pulled out his gift for the teacher, a thank you card, since the homeroom teacher had mentioned it last time. Aizawa looked over the card, and the man raised one wrapped arm and gently put it on his head. Thank you, Midoriya, the teacher said, removing the casted arm. Izuku smiled brightly, glad that the teacher had accepted the gift. He sat down and pulled out the jelly packet, carefully opening it up and trying it. Once more it was really good, the right amount of sweetness to really hit the spot. He caught Aizawa looking at him and the man's eyes seemed almost expectant. Izuku gave a thumbs up and a large smile and the teacher nodded, seemingly satisfied. Izuku could see why Aizawa-sensei would constantly eat them if they were that good. About 10 minutes passed and Ida came in, greeting him enthusiastically. Izuku just waved back, not saying anything. A couple minutes passed and the door opened. Mike-sensei came in, now dressed in his hero clothes and carrying coffee with a straw. Hey, Eraser. I brought you some coffee. Thanks, the homeroom teacher muttered. Izuku blinked, finding it strange how differently they acted when they were just around people who knew they were a couple. Izuku knew that if Ida wasn't here Mike-sensei would be holding the cup to make it easier for Aizawa to drink. Which made him wonder why the two hid their relationship. Also who all knew, it was obvious Recovery Girl did as the two were really open with her around, but did all the teachers know? Mike-sensei left and Izuku saw Aizawa dip his head down to sip the beverage. Not too long after the teacher finished the beverage the room started filling up with more classmates. The starting bell rang and Aizawa took attendance. No announcement for today. Do you have any questions about the sports festival? A few questions were asked and answered and then the teacher told them to study. The teacher sat down, closing his eyes. Hey Deku, how was your weekend? Uraraka, one of the few students who picked up Kaken's nickname for him, asked. She explained before USJ that she liked it cause she thought it gave a you can do it vibe. And it wasn't like Izuku was going to argue with her. That he wasn't comfortable being called that name. Izuku gave a so-so gesture with his hand, shrugging. The girl frowned at him for a moment, confusion clear. Your weekend was okay? He nodded, giving a thumbs up. Are you alright? Why aren't you speaking? Did you injure your throat? PFF. That DMN nerd's just gone mute again. The wimp won't speak today. What do you mean, Bakugo? Ida asked with his hand chopping motion. The nerd goes mute sometimes, he should be fine within another day or two. Is this true, Midoriya? Ashido questioned. Izuku nodded in response. Soon homeroom came to an end and English started up. He handed the apple to Mike-sensei who just nodded in appreciation. After English the day passed by quickly with Izuku taking a moment or two to give the teachers gifts, ignoring the strange looks his classmates gave him and the scoff from Bakugo. For heroics training, All Might had them go through some infiltration training, which Izuku unfortunately couldn't participate in due to his injuries. Then the day came to an end and his class left for home and he returned to 1A. He looked in and saw Aizawa-sensei wasn't there, so frowning he waited 10 minutes or so before he went to try and find the homeroom teacher. Or the English teacher, since finding one would probably lead to the other. He walked through the large school for a few minutes before he heard what sounded like laughter. "Come on. Just once, I promise it'll be fun." Midnight's voice purred. "Nam, really? You know I'm going to say no," Mick's voice returned, slightly exasperated. "Yes, I do know, maybe I just like hearing you say no," the art history teacher replied, snickering. "Oh, to many people agreeing to your proposals for fun." "Yes," she said, Izuku seeing her throwing her hands up as he stepped around the corner. "Little listener," Mike said with a smile. He paused, shifting the crutches to wave. "What are you doing here late, Midoriya? Shouldn't you be heading home?" Midnight questioned, a concerned note in her voice. He looked over to Mike, who chuckled. I'm taking the little listener home to make sure he gets there safely." The art history teacher nodded. "I see, I'll let you go on then." "Thanks," Mike-sensei said. "I'll see you later, Nem." "See you." Izuku followed Mike as they walked away from Midnight. The English teacher shook his head. "Now, let's go find Sho." Up here, Aizawa's voice floated down, causing Izuku to flinch and look up to see the homeroom. Teacher's face poking down from the surprisingly large vent grate. "Sho, how the hell did you get up there?" Present Mike questioned, a look of stunned disbelief on his face. "That's for me to know, and you to forever have as a mystery." There was a shifting and then the teacher was falling down through the vent grate and Present Mike caught him, an annoyed expression on his face. "I swear, Sho, you have got to stop disappearing into the vents to avoid the other teachers." Aizawa snorted. "Peef, they never think to look for me there." "Except for Nizu." The homeroom teacher just grunted, black eyes gleaming. Mike-sensei huffed. "Let's get the little listener to his home." Hizashi hummed as he drove to pick Midoriya up, Shoyuta in the passenger seat again. It was Tuesday morning and a bit overcast. He parked and then let the car idle as he went up the stairs, knocking on Midoriya's door. "I'll be out in a minute." Izuku's voice came through the door and Hizashi grinned, glad that the little listener finally was up for talking again. A moment later the door opened and Midoriya stood there, shifting on his crutches a bit as he closed the door behind him and locked it. Hizashi kept an eye on the kid as he made his way down the stairs, making sure the kid didn't trip. He handed over a mango jelly packet to the kid, who grinned, looking excited to try the new flavor. Actually, it kind of reminded him of how Shuta's eyes lit up whenever he got his favorite flavored jelly packet. He did hope the kid wouldn't get as obsessed with them as Shoyuta was. He got into the vehicle and listened as Midoriya enthused about how good the mango jelly packet was. Hizashi just knew his husband was smirking underneath those bandages. They arrived at the school and he went off to change into his hero outfit while Shoyuta and Midoriya went to class 1A. Hizashi changed and gelled up his hair into his iconic style now that he was out of the car. Doing it before was just a pain as the roof of the car ended up flattening the top. He stopped by the teacher's lounge, making a coffee with a lot of sugar for Shoyuta. Then he went to the classroom and mentally sighed as he saw Ito was already there. The kid always was arriving early, which was a bit of a shame, since he rather liked spending time with Shoyuta in the morning before the class arrived. He gave the coffee, sad that he wouldn't be able to help his husband with the beverage. It was a simple action, but he loved helping Shoyuta. It was just a nice domestic thing he could do to show the man that he would always be there. Shoyuta didn't say anything besides a thanks, but his eyes conveyed another message. "I love you, I appreciate this." Hizashi just smiled, giving a grin and a thumbs up. He went to find his own classroom and sat in the rolly chair and started spinning around, bored as he waited for his students to show up. Eventually they all did and he checked attendance for his general course class. Class ended and he made his way over to 1A to teach English. He managed to finish the lesson early and let the kids have the last 20 minutes to study and chat amongst themselves. "Call me Tsu, Midoriya," Ajui's voice called out and Hizashi glanced up from his phone. But..." The boy stuttered, looking nervous. The girl with the frog quirk frowned, tilting her head a bit. We're friends. You can call me Tsu. As soon as she said friends, Midoriya went completely pale and was shaking even worse. The kid's wide green eyes met his, then glanced to the door, a silent plea to escape. Midoriya, could you take this to Eraser for me? He should be in the teacher's lounge, he said, earning a relieved look as the kid hobbled up and took the paper. Thank you, the boy quietly whispered as he took the hastily scrawled note in hand and left. He was just glad that the kid thought to ask him, even if it was silent. The little listener had trusted him enough to even give such a clue as to what he wanted. Sensei, why did you ask Midoriya? Ida questioned. What kind of dumbass question is that? Bakugo questioned with a scoff. Frog Girl obviously gave the dim nerd a panic attack and Mike Sensei was getting Midoriya out of the room. What? A couple of the students questioned, surprised that Bakugo knew what was going on. Bakugo scowled. Deku doesn't have friends. And people trying to force friendship on him cause a panic attack. Why does he get a panic attack from people wanting to be his friends? Kaminari asked. Hizashi listened carefully as Bakugo pinched his nose. Look, a couple sheet extras basically befriended Deku back in middle school. Once they learned what he was scared of, they basically forced him into such a situation. They found he was scared of small dark closets and bugs, and they thought it would be a good prank to force him to confront his fears, so they shoved him into a room that another kid with an animal control quirk had filled with insects. Then that same kid commanded the bugs to attack Deku. I heard what was happening and ended up pulling the DMN nerd out. He had to go to the hospital afterwards, and all further attempts at friendship were met with panic attacks. That's horrible. Uraraka gasped, the others nodding and saying their own agreement. Hizashi was inwardly having his own panic. Just hearing of the bugs. Hizashi inwardly shuddered. The school must have expelled those too, right? Ida questioned. Bakugo rolled his eyes. Nah, the school gave them detention for a couple days. What? Seemed to be the collective answer. Bakugo frowned. What? It's not that big of a deal. Sure, what they did was bad, but the school isn't going to expel them over something as simple as a prank gone wrong. Dude, that's seriously messed up, Kirishima muttered. Hizashi frowned, glancing at his phone as Yagi said Midoriya had arrived and that Shoyuta was helping the kid, and that Hizashi should inform Namuri that the kid was excused from her class. Sent a thumbs up, and then typed out what he had learned from Bakugo to share with Shoyuta later, once his husband had gotten the story from Midoriya. The class came to an end, and he said that Midoriya would be absent for her class, and she nodded. Then Hizashi went to his next class. Shoyuta was resting in the teacher's lounge when a knock came at the door. Yagi, the only other person in the room, frowned as he went to open it, buffing up into his iconic all-might look. Young Midoriya? The man questioned, a worried note on his voice. He let the kid in and closed the door, shrinking back down. Shoyuta looked at the kid and saw that the boy was hyperventilating, on the verge of a panic attack. The kid walked over to him, holding up a note for him to read. Shoyuta glanced at it, seeing it was just a note from Hizashi that the kid needed to get away for a little bit. Sit, Midoriya, Shoyuta commanded gently, tilting his head to the spot next to him. Go get some hot chocolate, Yagi, he told the man who nodded and left the room. Shoyuta saw that the kid was working on grounding himself, and so he waited for a minute. Then he focused on the kid who was now calmer. Do you want to talk about what happened? The boy hesitated, shifting for a moment. Shoyuta almost thought the boy would say no, but then he gave a slow nod. Izuku bit his lip as he entered the class, before after a moment of indecision moving to sit next to Taro-kun and Kyo-kun. Recently the two boys decided that Izuku was their friend. They helped him out in class, and even kept Kakin away from him. With these two as his friends, they protected him. It was nice to feel wanted for once. Aizu-chan. Kyo-kun greeted him, smiling with razor-sharp teeth. Maki Kyo was a shorter boy, with long brown hair tied into a ponytail. He had narrow brown eyes that seemed to pierce into a person and find their weaknesses. Izuku sometimes thought that his eyes gave that feel because of Kyo-kun's quirk. His quirk was called judgment. It apparently allowed him to judge if a person was good or bad by looking at them. Or that was what it was in the simplest terms, According to Kyo-kun, it let him see if a person felt guilty for any specific action they've taken in the past 24 hours. Izuku thought it would be really useful in police work, or as a detective. Good morning, Kyo-kun, Taro-kun, Izuku greeted, glad he didn't stutter over their names. Taro gave a nod back, but was unable to respond as the teacher came in. Hachisuka Taro was a large boy, easily a couple head taller than everyone else in the classroom. He was thickly built, with large muscles. His head looked more rock-like, the top of his head flat and squared off, but his jaw jutting down into a pointed angle. Taro had a really cool quirk that let him communicate with insects, though Izuku couldn't help but to shy away. He didn't really like bugs after an incident when he was 7 and ended up stinged by a giant hornet. It was lucky his mom had gotten him to the clinic in time. A few days later, Taro-kun and Kyo-kun invited him to hang out for the weekend. So Izuku did, unaware of what his friends were planning. Everything seemed normal at first, but it was the afternoon of the first day and they were walking through the streets when they found a younger kid, one Izuku didn't recognize, but one Kyo-kun apparently did. "Oh look, it's Yamai." The younger child looked up, eyes apparently widening in fear as he turned and started to run away. Izuku had been confused as his friends gave chase to the boy, and so had followed after them, despite feeling that something was off with the situation. When he caught up to the two faster boys, they had the younger boy cornered, and Kyo-kun was holding him against the wall. "Why you doing?" Izuku asked, voice trembling. Taro-kun looked over at him and smiled. That smile sent shivers down Izuku's back, and he couldn't help but to take a step back. Something was very wrong. It almost looked like they were bullying the kid, but they wouldn't do that, right? "Aizu-chan," Taro started, wrapping an arm around him. "See, Yamai here owes us money, and has been avoiding us. We just want to collect what's owed." The younger-looking boy trembled. "I won't pay you anymore. Not after what it did to my sister." "See, even the kid admits to owing us money. Were your friends right?" Izuku hesitantly nodded to that. "Friends help each other. So how about you help us?" Izuku's stomach sank, but he didn't want to betray the trust his friends had in him, that they thought they could count on him to help them. "And, well, the kid admitted to owing money, right?" Izuku glanced at Taro-kun, and the boy's smile became even wider. "Help Kyo-kun hold Yamai." And Izuku did. He was unable to look away as Taro-kun hit the kid over and over again, unable to let go even as tears formed in his eyes. His stomach sank to the bottom of the earth, and Izuku knew that what was happening was wrong. But he so desperately wanted to be friends with someone. Desperately wanted to feel like he belonged. So he held on even as his heart screamed at him. A couple weeks passed like that, the two boys now inviting him more often, having him help in their bullying. And that's what it was. Izuku knew that. He knew it was wrong. But they didn't listen to him when he asked them to stop, so he stayed silent. The worst part was that a small part of Izuku liked it. He wasn't the one being hurt anymore, not now that he was with Taro-kun and Kyo-kun. If being friends with them meant hurting other people, then maybe that was just the cross he would have to bear. He wished his mom was still around. He could use her guidance in this matter. Was it really okay to hurt others if it meant not getting hurt himself? Izuku hated that he was being complacent to the bullying. Hated that he wasn't strong enough to stand up to his friends. Hated himself for letting others get hurt. He wanted to be a hero, didn't he? So why wasn't he helping the victims? Why was he helping the bullies? Then came the day when Taro-kun asked him why Izuku always shied away from his bugs, and he, foolish and naive, admitted to being afraid of bugs and small dark spaces. He hadn't realized then that the two boys were getting tired of him. Tired of his weak and cowardly ways, how noble he was. How he tried to get them to not hurt others as much. The following day they had shoved him into that dark closet, and Izuku felt a sting against his neck. Everything started going hazy and he was throwing himself against the walls of the closet, fear and desperation and anger clawing at him. How dare they hurt him like this? Izuku remembered screaming and shouting and burning white-hot rage, but he didn't remember exactly what he was saying. After a few minutes his fear had overtaken him and he was begging to be let out as the sounds of scuttling encroached him. He couldn't see anything, but he heard the movement, then felt it, thousands of little legs crawling over him. A buzzing around him let him know that flying insects were somehow in the closet, and he felt the bugs bite him. Felt stingers pierce into his skin. Everything went wobbly and black, and the next thing Izuku knew was he was waking up at the clinic. The boy was quite a moment longer after his nod, looking as if he was thinking about what happened, hands rubbing up and down his arms and tears gathering in his eyes before he spoke. Be back in my first year of J Junior H High School, a C couple boys W were really nice to me, and C claimed T that we were F friends, they S spent time with me, H helped me and were like A actual F friends. Eventually T asked about my fears and T thought they were my F friends. So I told them a few of them. Tears came to Midoriya's eyes. They have forced me into a dark closet. I heard some sort of scuttling sound and then I was being bit over and over again. I couldn't see them but I could feel the bugs crawling all over attacking me. I don't know how I got out. Just that I was in the clinic and the school actually gave those T2 boys detention. The school scolded them for sending me to the clinical. Only detention? Shoyuta questioned, incredulous. He knew that Alderaan was a bad school, but that went beyond bad. Was the school trying to raise villains? Midoriya nodded. Yes, the boys claimed it was just a prank, meant to help me get over my fears, that they didn't know that some of those insects were poisonous. I guess something triggered a flashback? Shoyuta questioned, keeping his tone soft. Ajith kept telling me to call her Titsu, and then when I wouldn't call her that, he said, we're friends. You can call me Tsu. And it just reminded me basically of how you claimed to be my friends, and I just... Midoriya was crying now, tears streaming down his face. It's alright, you can't help the things that cause you to panic, Shoyuta told the boy, and they sat for a minute in silence. Midoriya furiously wiping away the tears. The door opened, and Yagi came back in. He was carrying the beverage and brought it over to Midoriya, who took it. The man's blue eyes met his, looking questioningly at him for a moment. Shoyuta shook his head slightly. It wasn't Yagi's business, not unless Midoriya wanted to share with him. I asked Present Mike to inform Midnight that Midoriya was excused from her class, Yagi stated. He gave a nod, glancing over at the kid who was drinking the hot chocolate. For once Shoyuta was glad that Nedzu had another teacher subbing his history classes while he was recovering. The only class he currently had to teach was homeroom and heroics. Midoriya was silent now, not saying anything, and Shoyuta let the kid collect his thoughts. After another half an hour the kid said he was ready to return to class and he nodded. I'll escort you, my boy. Yagi stated. The kid nodded, and the two walked out of the room. Shoyuta frowned. He really needed to investigate Alderaan as quickly as possible, but with his arms out of commission, he might have to call in some favors from a couple other underground heroes. Izuku shuffled around his house, slowly getting ready for the school day. Yesterday hadn't been the best, but he had finally managed to put it out of his mind. Although now his classmates knew of his issue with friends, Kaken had told them of the incident. At least Azui had apologized, saying that if he was more comfortable calling her Azui then he didn't have to call her Tsu. He finished getting ready and waited by the door. Eventually there was a knock and he opened it, smiling a bit at Mike-sensei. You ready, kiddo? The man asked. Yes, Izuku replied. Mike-sensei handed him a new jelly packet to try, a peach-flavored one. After a not-so-quiet drive as Mike-sensei sang along with most of the songs on, they arrived at the school. This time Present Mike came with them to the room, chatting with Aizawa happily about some sort of dinner plan. Aizawa was listening, a fond look in his eyes, a sort of softness that he had around Mike. Izuku really liked that he could see this side of his teachers. It made them seem more human, and way different than his previous teachers. Ida came into the room, and Mike huffed, calling out a goodbye as he went to go change into his hero costume. Later at lunch, Izuku was eating when Ida asked, Do you think Mike-sensei dislikes me? Why you think that? Izuku questioned, startled by the question. Well, in the morning he always leaves after I arrive, or if he arrives after I do he never stays long. I thought at first that he just may not want to talk with a student there to overhear, but he seemed perfectly fine with you being there, so is it just me? I don't think he dislikes you. It's pure probably just that you come in. Around tea the same tea time he has tea to be getting tea to class, Izuku told the boy, though he knew that the reason was more likely to be along the lines that Ida didn't know the two were in a relationship. I see, thank you Midoriya, I should have considered that, Ida said, doing a hand-chopping motion. Lunch finished and then they began their heroics class. Another lesson on infiltration, this time going on how the skill was useful to the different types of heroes. The day came to an end and Izuku stayed behind with Aizawa-sensei as the rest of his classmates piled out. We forgot to tell you this morning that Hizashi and I will be part of a meeting. Do you mind waiting an hour or so for us to finish? It's fine, Izuku stated. Aizawa nodded. We'll find you, feel free to explore if you want. He gave a thumbs up and decided that since he had the time he should look around. About 10 minutes later he heard a soft bang, and curious he went in that direction. He found himself in what looked to be a shooting range, and the pro-hero snipe was shooting at targets that were moving fast. The teacher paused, looking towards him. Howdy. The man called out, lifting a hand in salute. Hello, Izuku nervously replied. You need something? The teacher questioned. And no, IIW is just exploring, Izuku answered. I'll get out of why you're wayin' now. You ain't both airin' me kiddo. Feel free to stick around if you want. Izuku hesitated, but in the end his curiosity won out, so he made his way further into the room. The teachers of UA really were different. None of them were as mean as the teachers at Alderaan had been. He watched as Snipe returned to shooting the targets. His quirk was really cool, being able to manipulate each of the shots he took. He must have very good eyesight, as the man did shoot Shigaraki's arm and didn't hit Izuku, despite being at the entrance of USJ. Izuku kept thinking about how useful the quirk was and possible different uses for it. He blinked as he realized he had been muttering, and thinking about it he had probably been muttering for a few minutes now. Yet the teacher made no comment on it being annoying. In fact, Snipe hadn't even seemed to notice it. Do you plan to use any support weaponry, something, to give you an edge? Snipe questioned after another couple minutes, working on reloading his pistol. I never are really thought about it, Izuku responded. Midoriya Izuku, quirk, superpower, enhances your physical strength, making you a short-range fighter. If you were gonna get something, your best bet would be something that gives you more range. Izuku blinked at that, tilting his head. Snipe turned to him and Izuku couldn't see the teacher's eyes or anything. It was a bit unnerving, not being able to read whatever expressions the man could be making. I help students decide on support weaponry. Plenty of kids think of their own things they need, but some of y'all struggle to find useful items that can help counteract your weaknesses. That's where I come in. I usually help out with second and third years, but I help any kid who finds me. So what do you say, want to figure out something to help you out? Sure, Izuku agreed and the teacher nodded, going over to a wall and clicking a button. The wall spun around, revealing a bunch of weapons. Then the teacher started him with a bow and some arrows. Izuku didn't like how they felt in his hands. The teacher went with a crossbow next and Izuku still didn't feel like it was right. He didn't want something that took up both of his hands. He told this to Snipe, who nodded. The man had him try a throwing spear next, but it felt clunky to him. Next the teacher went on to throwing knives and they weren't bad. He tried a blow dart, which was cool, but not something that he thought really would fit him. Next Snipe had him shot a pistol, saying that while he had to start with two hands, eventually he could learn to use it one-handed if he liked it. Izuku tested out the gun and was surprised by how much of an actual kick there was to it. The teacher moved on and he tested out a strange weapon called a chakram, which seemed pretty fun, but it was complicated as he could easily hurt his hand when throwing the circular blade. Then he also tried a boomerang. That's some of the more common weaponry. Anything suits your fancy? I liked both the gun and the chakram. The teacher nodded. I recommend focusing on one weapon for now. Which do you think will be the best to learn right now? Izuku looked between the two weapons. The G-gun. Snipe gave a hum. Alright, what sort of gun do you want to start with? A pistol, Izuku answered after a moment of thought. Snipe grabbed the pistol and handed it over, going over some basic instructions. Right, I'll have Power Loader design one that fits your look, and we'll start you off with some rubber bullets. Come by after school next Wednesday and I'll give you the rundown. Sound good? Izuku nodded, quietly stuttering out a thanks. The student turned, starting to exit out the door when it opened, and Mike stuck his head in. "There you are, little listener." "Ah, hello, Snipe," the English teacher said, waving. "Howdy, Mike," Snipe greeted. "You taking the kiddo home?" "Yeah," Mike said, giving a thumbs up. "Are you ready to go, Midoriya?" Present Mike asked. Izuku nodded, and followed the teacher, soon getting into Mike-sensei's car, the hero now back to his civilian outfit, hair loose and hanging down. While in the vehicle, he told his teachers of what happened, and that he was excited about learning something that can help him grow stronger as a hero. Aizawa told him it was good he was learning a new skill to help widen his options. Eventually they arrived at his home and they dropped him off at the apartment, Mike-sensei walking him up the stairs. Mike-sensei, Izuku started hesitantly. "Ya, little listener?" the man asked, tilting his head and looking down towards him, green spiraled eyes meeting green eyes. Thank you for not being," Izuku trailed off. Mike-sensei smiled, eyes full of understanding and compassion. "I would never hurt you on purpose, little listener. You're one of my students. It's my job to take care of you all, and it's one I take pride in. I love seeing you all grow into outstanding heroes." Izuku smiled, a small thankful grin, and went inside of his home. He called out a hello to his mom, who said hello back, staring at the TV. He went into his room and started doing the assigned homework. After he finished his work, he went into the kitchen and started cooking some rice and fish with some miso. He ate and made sure his mother ate, then put her in bed after telling her to shower. He took his own shower and headed off to bed. She grimaced, feeling the clawing at her mind, a desperation that clouded her judgment. She needed to satisfy the craving to fulfill the urge. She hated it. Hated this feeling. Hated that she couldn't control herself. She wanted nothing more than to stop. But if she stopped, she couldn't let that happen again. She would save others, even if it meant sacrificing herself. She just hoped that he would be willing to help her again. Not that he knew he was helping her. He just thought she wanted to have fun. Maybe once she did, long ago before the attack. Before she lost the guy she loved. Before she realized what a cruel world they lived in. She had been so naive back then, and they had taken advantage of it. She wouldn't let that happen to any other kids. Not if she could help it. But in the meantime, it was time to satisfy that curse she now lived with. The next morning he did everything he normally did and got ready for Mike-sensei to pick him up. Soon the man was knocking on the door and Izuku was carefully walking down the stairs and getting into the car. "Friday, after school, recovery girl is going to be checking on you and show Yuta, make sure everything is healing up right." "Alright," Izuku responded. Mike handed over a new jelly packet, this one pineapple flavored. It was certainly interesting but not his favorite out of the ones he had tried. They arrived and split ways, Mike probably going to put on his hero outfit. They arrived in class and Izuku sat down. Aizawa was sitting for a few minutes before he got up and headed out of the room, and Izuku wondered where the teacher was going. A little after the teacher left, Ida came in. 5 minutes after that, Mike came into the room, blinking a bit. "Where did Eraser go?" he questioned, looking over his sunglasses at Izuku. "I don't know," Izuku answered. "He wasn't here when I came in," Ida answered at the same time. Mike huffed, rolling his eyes exaggeratedly, as he turned and walked out of the room. Only a couple minutes later Mike came back, carrying a giant yellow sleeping bag. Present Mike carefully put down Aizawa-sensei. "I swear you're a pain," Mike grumbled. "Let me sleep," the teacher grumbled. Mike shook his head, turning and leaving the room. But Izuku saw how his lips twitched up. He looked over to Ida and saw the boy frowning. "Sensei, if you're tired you should get more sleep," the boy stated, his tone worried. At least after USJ his classmates weren't as criticizing of Aizawa. Aizawa just grunted in reply, not saying anything, and soon the classroom was filling up with students and they went on with their day. After lunch was over the class returned to the room and found writing on the board. "For the past few days you have been learning how to infiltrate places and how to hide from villains. Now it's time to use those skills in reverse. Come find me, you have 2 hours. Start when the bell rings." The class gets excited and starts speculating where the teacher could be hiding. When the bell goes off all of them are up immediately, dashing off. Izuku started to get up, then paused, remembering a bit of conversation from Monday. I swear, you have got to stop disappearing into the vents to avoid the other teachers. Mike-sensei had said, and Aizawa had responded with a snort, saying that they never thought to look for him up in the vents. Everyone was out of the room now, and Izuku looked up, peering into the dark vent, and he saw the white bandages and dark eyes staring down at him through the vent grates. Izuku snickered and sat back down in his chair. Well, it would seem he had 2 hours to get his homework for the day done. About an hour passed and he was finishing up the last of the homework, when the door opened and Ojiro came in with Shiro. "Oh hey Midoriya, are you not looking or something?" He looked up, giving a hesitant smile as he responded, "I already found him." "You did? Where is he hiding? I swear our class has managed to search the entire school," Shiro stated. "And not telling," Izuku said. "Did Aizawa tell you that you couldn't tell us or something?" Ojiro asked. That did seem like something Aizawa would say actually, so he shrugged, not exactly agreeing with what they said, but not denying it either. "Man, well, we better get back to looking. I thought maybe he came back here after everyone left." Ojiro and Shiro left the room and Izuku looked up to the vent, and the teacher simply nodded at him and closed his eyes again, probably napping. Izuku finished his last piece of homework and with nothing better to do he decided taking a nap was a good idea. He woke up to the sound of the door opening and a disappointed sigh. "Aw man, I can't believe none of us could find him," Kaminari's voice complained as he walked in. "Midoriya bro, did you get tired or something?" Kirishima questioned. "Shiro told me that Midoriya found sensei sometime before the first hour mark," Jaira commented as she followed in behind the boys. "Really? Where was he hiding?" Kaminari asked him, even as the rest of the class took their seats. The door opened and Aizawa walked in, and Izuku blinked, wondering when the teacher had moved from his spot in the vent. "Only one of you managed to find me. Good job, Midoriya. He is also not permitted to tell you where I was hiding in case I decided to do this exercise again at a later date. I will review the footage tonight and give comments on shortcomings tomorrow. For the last 30 minutes, I want you to write a self-reflection on what you think you did wrong. Once you are done, turn it in and feel free to head out early." Midoriya pulled out a piece of paper and wrote, "Having an unfair advantage of hearing you say no one thinks to look for you in the vents." He didn't get up immediately. In fact, he waited for the rest of his classmates to turn theirs in and leave before he got up and turned it in, Aizawa tilting his head a bit before he glanced down and read over the line, snorting in amusement. Being a hero isn't fair. It wasn't against the rules to take advantage of information you may have gathered. "I wonder why no one else looks for UT there," Izuku mused. "Not many people think to look up," Aizawa responded. "We should go find Zashi." The two started to walk out and make their way through the hall when Midnight's voice called out from a distance behind them, "Eraser! There you are, I was wanting to talk with you." "Yeah, talk to me about trying to convince me to help prank Hizashi." "Not today." Aizawa muttered, eyes rolling. "Follow me quickly, Midoriya. And keep quiet." The teacher quickly started walking faster and Izuku hobbled after the teacher, managing to keep pace as they rounded the corner, and Aizawa whispered something Izuku didn't catch wind of and the floor opened up underneath them. Izuku bit his lip to keep from crying out in shock, remembering Aizawa telling him to keep quiet. He winced as the landing jarred him and he made a thud noise. He blinked, trying to adjust to the dark, and he felt a hand on his shoulder and he stilled. "What? Where did they disappear?" Midnight's voice called out, confused, from above them. Footsteps echoed above him, walking away. Izuku's eyes finally adjusted and he looked around, seeing that he looked to be in a long metal tube. "Welcome to the vents," Aizawa said. "They're big," Izuku whispered out. Aizawa snorted. "Indeed, normally I can access them by navigating the app Nizu created on my phone, but with my hands out of commission I'm having to resort to the voice passcodes. So cool, it's like a spy school." The homeroom teacher started walking through the vent, his footsteps silent. When Izuku followed, he winced at how loud his movements seemed to echo through the vents. The homeroom teacher huffed, "We're going to have to work on you moving silently, though the crutches don't help. Try to place them down slower and gently to not make as much noise. We might move slower, but less chance for Nemuri or someone else to hear us," the teacher advised. Izuku moved the crutch more carefully, managing to place it somewhat quietly. Soon he got into a pattern and he wasn't making as much as a racket, though there was still a bit of noise. Eventually they arrived at a larger area, almost room-like, and it had multiple vents leading off in different directions, and there was a small door in the vent with a couple arrow buttons. Aizawa pressed the up button. There's an elevator into the vent? Izuku questioned, startled as the door opened and the two got in, though it was a bit of a squeeze. Yes, also the answer to the mystery Zashi is trying to figure out, Aizawa said as the elevator moved up. I'll keep it a secret, Izuku promised. I figured you would, the teacher commented, giving a shrug as if it was no big deal. They exited the elevator and then there was a ding, and Izuku blinked, surprised his phone had gone off considering he had it on mute. About time, Aizawa grumbled, pull it out and download what Nizu sent you. Izuku pulled his phone out and saw it was an email alert. Opening the email he saw it was a link and the email address was presumably Nizu's email address. He clicked on the link and it led him to a website which automatically started downloading something. When it finished downloading he found a new app on his phone, simply labeled Maze Access. He tapped it open and saw a map of the current level of the school they were above. There are a couple ways in and out, through the vent grates, though entering them is impossible without either using the app to unlock them or the voice access code. Then there are select spots in the walls and floor where you can access them as well, Aizawa informed him as they walked through the vents, heading down a slight drop at one point before stopping at one place that looked empty. Take a look, see where we're at, how there is a red outline on this section? Izuku nodded. It means that there is an access point in this section, click on it once. He followed the instruction and it changed, revealing a 3D view, showing the vent they were in and the hallway they were next to. Right now it's empty, but if someone was there it would show dots with little arrows signaling the direction they are facing. It also shows where the access is located if you don't know. Now from this view you can double tap on the red outline to unlock and open the door, which will automatically close behind us. The other way to unlock them is on the zoomed out view. You can double tap the area to unlock it. This is so cool, Izuku whispered in awe as he double tapped and the two walked out of the section of the vent and wall that opened up, letting them into the hallway. Just be careful not to let others figure out how you enter, but otherwise have fun. Why you mean I can enter the vents if I want to? Izuku questioned hesitantly as the two started making their way through the hallways. Aizawa nodded. Nizu was planning on showing you anyways, so don't be surprised if you see him. The principal was planning on showing me? Izuku repeated. Didn't tell me why, Aizawa informed him. There you two are. I was looking all over for you, Mike-sensei's voice called out. I was avoiding Nemuri. Mike snickered. I know, I ran into her and she complained to me that you somehow still managed to disappear, despite the little listener here being with you. I think she's starting to believe you have some sort of secondary disappearing quirk. Though I got to admit even I am stumped how you disappeared with Midoriya. Aizawa's eyes glinted and the bandages on his face shifted. Mike paused. You're doing that wide grin of yours, aren't you? Aizawa-sensei nodded. What did you do, Sho? Mike questioned. The homeroom teacher kept silent, his eyes amused. Midoriya, what did he do? Mike asked, turning to him. Izuku smiled and kept his mouth shut. Present Mike sniffed dramatically. I see how it is, betrayed by my husband and my favorite listener. Oh, how cruel this world is. Aizawa snorted, shaking his head, as he started walking off, Izuku and Mike following after him. I suppose I'll tell you that I'm teaching Midoriya my secret vent ways. Mick's hand went to his heart. You're sharing your vent's secrets? Oh. Aizawa rolled his eyes. Stop being so dramatic. Izuku giggled, watching the two banter back and forth. They exited the building and made their way to the car, Mike pouting. But I am dramatic. It's just the vents, maybe you should figure out how to access them yourself. Surely it shouldn't be too hard for you to figure out, Aizawa said, a slight shift in his voice as his eyes glinted in amusement. Sho, Mike whined, you know I've been trying. Try harder, Aizawa deadpanned. If I see how it is, Mike said, sniffing and looking away. Aizawa sighed. And now he is going to give me the silent treatment. The drive was silent except for some music that was playing as Mike drove them to his home. Though the silence didn't feel stiff or awkward, and neither of the two teachers seemed upset, so he supposed it was still friendly teasing. Eventually they arrived and Mike walked him up the stairs. "See you tomorrow, little listener." "See you, Mike-sensei," Izuku said, nodding to the man as he unlocked the door and went into his apartment. The door closed shut behind him with a soft thud. Izuku was waiting when the knock at the door came and he leapt up, saying goodbye to his mom as he exited the apartment, smiling at Mike-sensei who grinned back. "How are you today?" the teacher asked. "I'm doing good," Izuku answered. "That's great," Mike said as they walked down the stairs. "How are you?" Izuku asked, feeling comfortable enough around the teacher that he felt he could speak up a bit. Mike beamed. "I'm doing wonderful. I managed to get Sho to sleep the entire night as well, instead of staying up working." Don't tell him I said this, but the man is like a nice cuddly cat. Izuku chuckled a bit, even as he got into the vehicle. Next to his seat he found a jelly packet, and in the cup holder a beverage. "We stopped by a coffee shop on the way and decided to pick you a hot chocolate," Aizawa said, moving one bandaged arm to gesture towards the front cup holders which had 2 cups. "Thank you," Izuku said, a warm feeling in his chest. "It's no problem, little listener," Mike said with a large beaming grin. Izuku picked up the beverage and tentatively sipped at it. Finding it the perfect warmth, he started drinking it down, putting the jelly packet into his pocket for later. They arrived and Mike-sensei carried the 3 beverages as Izuku needed his hands for the crutches. They went to the classroom and Mike placed the beverages down, one on Aizawa's desk and another on his own. "I'll see you later. Don't forget that after school today you have a checkup with Recovery Girl." "We know we'll be there," Aizawa responded. Mike chuckled, leaning down and giving his homeroom teacher a quick kiss. "Even if she heals you, you're not escaping commenting in the booth with me." Aizawa groaned. "Don't remind me." "Too late, besides you shouldn't have lost the bet," Mike said, laughing as he stood back up and walked out of the room. A little while later and Ida came in, blinking as he saw Aizawa and Izuku both drinking from the same containers. "Are you arriving together?" Ida asked. "Yes. Due to our injuries, Mike has been picking us up and driving us to our homes," Aizawa answered, not even looking up from his coffee. "Oh, that explains why Midoriya has not been on the train this past week." Soon more students came into the room and the bell rang, signaling the start of the day. Homeroom passed and soon it was English, and partway through the lesson he remembered he had the jelly packet. He pulled it out, glancing to see it was yet another new flavor. This time it was muscat. He opened and tried it, no one paying him any mind as they were allowed to have snacks in class so long as it wasn't a distraction, which basically meant nothing that would make too much noise. Soon the lesson came to an end and next they had an art history lesson with Midnight, and the day continued on through the normal classes, modern literature lesson with Cementos, followed by math with ectoplasm, and finally it was lunch. Izuku started towards the cafeteria, but he didn't feel that hungry, and didn't want to deal with the noise. So he decided that lunch would be a good opportunity to start exploring the vents, walking away until he found an empty hall. He shifted his crutches underneath one arm as he pulled out his phone and opened the app. He found where he was and clicked on the hallway he was in. It zoomed in and revealed there were 2 access points, one on the wall and one from the roof. He walked to the one in the wall and double-checked no one was nearby as he double-tapped the button and walked into the vent. After he did that, he put his phone in his pocket, deciding to just walk around. He shifted his crutches again to have one under each arm as it was easier to move that way. Slowly he made his way through the vent, doing his best to keep quiet. That was how Aizawa found him 5 minutes later, the man walking through the vents silently. "Hello, Midoriya," the teacher greeted. Aizawa-sensei," Izuku responded. "Did you already finish lunch?" I wasn't hungry," Izuku answered. The teacher nodded. "Follow me." So Izuku followed as they went through twists and turns in the vents. Then they arrived in a large vent room, this one different from the one that had an elevator. This one had a fridge, a TV, and 3 beanbags. A yellow one, a white one, and a green one. "Nizu already brought you a beanbag," the teacher said, nodding towards the green beanbag as he took a seat on the yellow one. "In the fridge are some snack foods. Izuku said in awe as he sat on the beanbag. But why is all of this in the vents? Why not? A chipper voice said from behind him, and Izuku flinched, startled. Izuku shrugged, not having an answer to that. He shifted a bit closer to Aizawa as he looked at the principal. You're quite an interesting student. Your written scores on most of the test wasn't anything special, but on the portion that required you to analyze for strengths and weakness of a given quirk you excelled, with the highest score ever received on that portion of the test. And then I read your journals. Nizu grinned, his pure black eyes gleaming. I feel your skills would be useful and should be honed. So you will be having lessons with me on occasion. Our first lesson will be next week. Don't worry about the time or place. With that the principal left. How did he read my J journals? Izuku questioned. I never brought them here. Aizawa sighed. He probably broke into your home at one point then. Izuku's mouth fell open. Isn't that illegal? It's Nizu, Aizawa responded, as if that explained everything. He found my skills useful and taught me how to use the vents. He can be a bit long-winded at times, but his lectures generally have some useful information hidden in them. Izuku frowned a bit, not sure what to think of the principal. Lunch will be ending soon, we better get you to class before the others arrive, Aizawa said after a few minutes of silence. Aizawa stood up and Izuku did as well, carefully hobbling after him. They arrived above a vent grate and Aizawa peered down, seeing the empty room. Mind the drop here in a moment. Also the password for all the vents is the same, deadless. Aizawa said in a quiet voice as they dropped down into Class 1A. The password is useful for when you know where a vent access is and need a quick entrance. Or if you're dropping down through a vent grate, you just need to whisper the password and it will open up. Besides that the password is so uncommon, it also will only open up for those who have access to the vents, which is just us and Nizu at the moment. The teacher informed him. Perhaps it was the way the two sat in it, comfortable silence, or that the teacher had been so understanding, or even that Aizawa had shared the secret of his relationship with Mike with him yet, or how the teacher had leapt right into danger to save all the students, but Izuku found that he trusted Aizawa. He trusted that the teacher wouldn't hurt him, that Aizawa would help him. It was a startling realization, to know just how comfortable he was with the teacher. He had never felt comfortable with a teacher before. Had hated being alone in rooms with them, even before that final year of Alderaan. The bell showing the end of lunch rang and the students started returning to the classroom. Izuku winced as he heard their chattering, a dull throb in his head spiking painfully, and he felt a headache come on to him. It started as just a dull throb but steadily seemed to get worse, becoming an unrelenting ache that seemed to center itself behind his eyes, which itched and he kept rubbing at them. He saw a worried glance from his classmates throughout the lesson from his constant shifting. Midoriya, do you need to go to the nurse's office? Yaoyorozu questioned. I have A&A appointment after C classes already, for AAC check-in, Izuku responded, wincing as his head pounded. Are you sure you don't want to go early? Izuku nodded, and Yaoyorozu returned to working on the assigned work, a quiz over the different rules the various types of heroes had to obey. Class ended and Aizawa was soon by his side, helping him to the nurse's office as Izuku squeezed his eyes shut, trying to resist the urge to rub at them again. They arrived and Recovery Girl's voice startled him. She was asking something about how they were feeling, and Izuku heard Aizawa speak up for him. Midoriya developed a headache after lunch. It got worse throughout the lesson. It seems to be among migraine levels. He soon found himself sitting down and Recovery Girl was checking over him. I can't find anything obviously wrong. It's probably just a normal headache. Here, dearie, some pain medication to help. He took the pills and then drank the offered water, keeping his eyes closed as he felt her hands on him as she carefully undid the bandages. He was tense, though he knew it was only Recovery Girl, but also he trusted that Aizawa wouldn't let harm come to him. The door opened and he tensed. Hey Sho, Midoriya, Mick's voice called out. Izuku didn't untense, but he also didn't open his eyes. A few minutes later and he felt bandages being wrapped back around his chest, and one of his legs was placed back into the cast, while the other one was bandaged back up. It looks like it's healing up nicely, and you might have enough stamina if you eat and sleep well that I will be able to heal you up for the sports festival. So long as you take care of yourself, that is. Izuku didn't say anything and just sat there, waiting for the pain medication to kick in. He heard her walk away, and rustling of more bandages, and he assumed she was checking over his teacher. Izuku cracked his eyes open, wincing a bit as the light seemed to be brighter. He looked at Aizawa and saw that his face was still black and purple, bruised heavily, though the open wound that used to be there was now scabbed over. Recovery girl prodded gently, asking him how it felt. She checked his arms next. You're healing up decently, though I would recommend resting more. Your stamina is still low. At this point I won't be able to heal you until after the sports festival. He hissed as his head felt like it was being put through the blender and closed his eyes. What's wrong with the little listener? Mike asked. Seems like a migraine. I gave him some painkillers which should be kicking in another 15 to 20 minutes, Recovery girl informed him. Alright, Midoriya, do you want to wait here for the painkillers to kick in, or would you prefer if I carried you to the car so you can get home quicker? Izuku wanted to go home and curl up on his bed. But, did he want Mike-sensei to carry him? Especially as he was in pain right now? Izuku couldn't bring himself to trust the English teacher that much, so he mumbled to stay here. He heard Aizawa and Mike talk quietly and slowly. As the medicine kicked in, he felt the pain fade away and he could open his eyes again, though his vision seemed to be swimming. I'm Jiguden now, Izuku said. He grabbed his crutches and hobbled out of the nurse's office with the teachers, sticking close to Aizawa-sensei. He got into the car and let his eyes slide shut again, feeling somewhat nauseous from how everything seemed to be shifting around. We're here, Mick's voice said, causing him to open his eyes again as he got out of the car and hobbled up the stairs after saying goodbye to Aizawa-sensei. He would have fallen off the stairs if it wasn't for Mike steadying him out, spiraled green eyes worried. He didn't say anything and just continued up, digging in his pocket for a key and entering the room, with a mumbled goodbye to the English teacher. Soon he collapsed onto the bed and curled up. The pain may be gone, but his vision was still shifting and blurring. He closed his eyes. He woke up in agony. His head hurt and he wanted to claw his eyes out as they felt like acid in his skull. Izuku made the stupid decision of trying to open his eye and then had to slam them shut again as a pure blinding white greeted him. He couldn't see anything and his head hurt. Like someone was taking a bat to his head and whacking him repeatedly. Izuku cried, curling up in pain. He couldn't do anything, couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't see. He laid on his bed and couldn't do anything but hope the pain would go away soon. So you need our help eraser? Ms. Joke asked, looking surprised that he had actually called on her and Rocklock. Yes, as you can see I got injured, but I need someone to pick up the investigation I was doing. Alright, what is it? Alderaan Junior High. I have already determined that. They have an extreme case of quirk discrimination that they let go on, and purposely letting the teachers sabotage students. But, I also have reason to believe one of the teachers is a Pefli. I don't have any proof, and was planning on tailing the man to see if I could learn anything when I got injured. So you want us to tail the man, and dig up this school's dirty secrets, Rocklock stated. Yes, at least until I am healed up. We owe you, just leave it to us. Maybe afterwards we can go on a date, Ms. Joke said, grinning at him. Shota sighed and shook his head. Hizashi had Namuri pursuing him, and he had Ms. Joke. No, he answered flatly and she laughed. I'll get you to agree one day. No you won't. She waved dismissively, leaving the room, leaving him with Rocklock. Why don't you just tell her you have someone else already? Shota looked at Rocklock, raising an eyebrow. The man shook his head. I'm married, dude. I can see that look in your eyes. You have someone you care about, though I don't know who. He just nodded. I do have a partner I am happily married to, he said, giving a confirmation to Rocklock. I understand if you're trying to keep them safe by not telling others about it, but make sure they are fine with that. You don't want them feeling like you're trying to hide the relationship. Me and my wife nearly got a divorce because of that. Shota paused, pursing his lips behind the bandages. Did Hizashi feel like that? He had brought up that they keep their relationship private, and Hizashi didn't protest it, saying it was fine, but what if his husband was upset by it? Thank you, Shota stated, giving a nod to his fellow underground hero. The man nodded, leaving the room, and Shota stayed behind another couple minutes before leaving, going to the parking lot where Hizashi was waiting in the car for him. His husband spotted him and came out the car, Sho. How did your meeting go? Did they agree to help? Hizashi opened the door letting him in and going around to the driver's side. Yes, Shota trailed off. Is something wrong, Sho? Hizashi asked, pausing and starting the car. No, not really, just Lockrock brought up something. Oh. He told me that he understood wanting to keep a relationship secret to protect someone. I guess he assumed you were a civilian or something, but he mentioned that he did the same thing with his wife and they nearly got a divorce because of it. I guess I never really asked you if you wanted us to go public with our relationship. Hizashi stared at him with wide eyes. His gaze softened and his husband lifted a hand, cupping his face. Sho, I don't need the world to know about our relationship, so long as I have you by my side then I'm happy. If you want to keep it between us and a few others, that's fine. If you want to tell others, that's fine as well. I just want you to stay by my side. Once again Shota was glad for the bandages as he felt his face warming up. How did Hizashi always know the right things to say to make his heart miss a beat? His husband turned back to the wheel and started the car up, driving them towards their small home they lived in. Want me to put on Sherlock while I cook dinner? Sure, Shota agreed. Frankly, he hated how his arms were useless. It stopped him from doing anything actually productive. But Hizashi had found this show from before the Quirk era that was pretty interesting. After an hour his husband came in and sat next to him, holding a large plate and a pair of chopsticks, and the man started to feed them, switching between the two of them. It was frustrating that he needed Hizashi to feed him, but the way Hizashi's eyes sparkled made it worth bearing. They finished eating and Hizashi helped him change clothes, working the shirt off around his casts carefully before reslinging them. After changing into some comfortable sweatpants the two headed off to bed, Hizashi curling around him, nuzzling his neck a bit. I love you, Shota. He smiled. I love you too, Hizashi. Izuku woke up once more with his stomach rumbling angrily. He kept his eyes closed, awaiting the pain, but besides for a slight sort of pressure there was no pain. Cautiously he opened his eyes up. He could see again. Izuku looked around, blinking a bit as his vision seemed almost sharper than it was previously. Frowning he glanced at his phone, noticing that it was Sunday. He had spent all of Saturday curled up on his bed in pain and blinded. He had passed out at one point, it was so bad. Izuku sat up, rubbing at his eyes, and frowned when his hand came away with a ton of crust. Not the normal sleep crust, but more. He looked at his hand and saw that the crust was whitish. Looking at a mirror he saw that there was a bunch of that strange white crust around his eyes, and trailing down his face towards his ear that had been on the pillow. Looking at the pillow he noticed that there was more of the strange white stuff on it. Going to the bathroom he washed his face, removing that strange white crust. He grabbed his pillow and took off the pillowcase, tossing it onto his laundry basket to wash later. But first he needed to get some food, he was starving. Plus he didn't know if his mom had eaten anything. If it was a good day she probably got herself something to eat, if it was a bad day then she probably didn't. He went into the kitchen, fumbling a bit with the crutches, finding his mom sitting staring at the turned-off TV blankly. Next to her was an empty bowl of leftovers that was starting to smell. He grabbed it and put it into the kitchen sink, then started to make a meal. He served her, apologizing for not cooking food yesterday. She claimed it was fine, saying that he should be more careful not to get hurt. She didn't really understand that he just had a horrible headache, but that was fine. His eyes felt a bit dry, but it wasn't that bad. Still he felt worn out. After he finished he returned to his room, shifting his second pillow to be more in the center. Izuku wasn't sure why he was so tired. Maybe tomorrow he should visit Recovery Girl if he wasn't feeling better. He collapsed onto the bed and fell asleep, exhaustion claiming him despite not having been up for long. He woke up to a knocking. He blinked, frowning in confusion. A knock came again. Midoriya? Mick's voice called out. He stumbled out of his bed, grabbing the crutches and hobbling to the door, opening it just as Mike opened his mouth. Whoa, the man said, worry shining in his eyes. I slept I and B by accident, Izuku said. I'm more concerned that you look like Sho when he hasn't gotten any sleep for a week. What happened? I don't know. I woke you up a Saturday with an even worse headache than F Friday. I couldn't even get O out of bed. I passed out F from the pain. IW woke up briefly yesterday and ate some food, then W went back to SL sleep exhausted. Izuku answered, rubbing at his eye trying to relieve that strange pressure he felt. It wasn't painful, just unfamiliar. Are you feeling okay now? Do you want to take a sick day? I am fine. Just my phone probably died. I am sorry. It's no problem, go ahead and get ready. I'll go tell Shota what happened and wait for you. Sound good? He bit his lip as he nodded, but he added, it'll be a few minutes. If you want tea to wait inside, why you can. Mick's smile almost seemed to brighten the apartment up. Thanks, little listener, I'll see you in a few. Izuku turned, heading back into his room, and wrinkled his nose. Because of his tiredness, he didn't do laundry over the weekend like he normally did. He grabbed the container and moved it out into the hallway as a reminder for later. He hopped into the shower, quickly rinsing himself off and rushing out, barely taking a couple minutes. Izuku dried up and put on his clothes. He grabbed his backpack and frowned. He didn't really have time to grab gifts for the teachers. He would just have to suffer a week of low grades. He exited his room and saw Mike standing in the hall, looking at the basket with a frown. Izuku followed his gaze towards the white crust. I don't know what that stuff is. IW woke up with it all over my eyes and on my pillow. How odd. Do you mind if I grab a sample to see if we can figure out what it is? It may be nothing, but you were hurting all weekend and that white stuff could be some sort of side effect. It's fine, Izuku said, watching as Mike reached into a pocket, pulling out a small kit. It was about the size of a larger smartphone and an inch thick. Portable miniature kit, just to have something on hand when I'm not in my hero outfit. Never know when you'll come across a crime scene and need to safely collect evidence, Mike said, smiling as he saw the confused look Izuku was making. He saw how the man grabbed a small petri dish and a brush, swiping the loose stuff into the dish and then closing the lid on it. The man slid the kit back into his pocket. All right, I'm ready to go now, are you? Izuku nodded. Mike looked at his tie, which he hadn't even tied yet, just threw it around his neck. Do you mind if I fix your tie? The teacher asked, gesturing to it. Izuku hesitated, but then nodded. Hizashi smiled and stepped forward, carefully taking the tie and fixing it. Is that too tight? No, it's fine. Mike nodded and stepped back, a warm look in his eyes that reminded him a bit of how Aizawa looked. Then the two of them were leaving the apartment. He followed after the teacher, walking down the stairs carefully. He got into the car and smiled at Aizawa, who was looking over him with worry. Zashi told me what you said. Do you want to go to Recovery Girl during homeroom? No. I'm fine, Izuku responded, finding it easier to talk to Aizawa. Present Mike started driving and part of the way there he stopped at a McDonald's. Going through the drive-thru, what would you like, little listener, since you missed breakfast? Why you don't have tea too? Izuku protested, waving his arms a bit as he flushed, embarrassed. But I want to. Feel free to have anything you want. Besides, we're already going to arrive late, might as well have food, Mike said with a small laugh. The egg MC McMuffin, and a sea chocolate shake, please, Izuku hesitantly requested. Aizawa huffed. If they ask why we're late, you can just claim traffic Midoriya, if you don't want to tell them the truth. They finally pulled up and present Mike ordered 2 egg McMuffins, Izuku's chocolate shake, 2 coffees, plus a breakfast burrito. Soon they were pulling up and receiving their food and Mike drove them to the school, eating the food along the way, Aizawa a bit comically as he pinched the egg McMuffin between his 2 casts. Mike of course teased him about it, earning a glare from the bandages. Oh, is my mummy of a husband annoyed at me? Your glare isn't as effective when you're all wrapped up like that. I'll have you know my students find it just as terrifying, Aizawa retorted. I don't know about that, let's ask Midoriya what he thinks. The Shido still squeaks the same, Izuku answered. Aizawa huffed. She needs to learn to be more discreet if she's going to talk in class. They pulled up into the school and got out, Mike huffing that he was going to be even later as he would have to change into his hero outfit. Just go in your civilian wear, it's not like the kids wouldn't recognize you in a heartbeat if they ever saw you on the street. He could pretend to be a sub that J just locks like a twin of himself, Izuku hesitantly suggested as the idea popped into his mind. Mike laughed. That's hilarious, little listener, I think I'll do that, see if I can go the whole day with people thinking I'm not actually myself. Aizawa snorted. If you're going to do that, you will need to act differently. That's easy, I'll just act like you show, Mike answered. Split paths and Aizawa and Izuku entered the classroom and the students fell silent. You arrived late, Midoriya, Ida said to him as he entered first. Traffic was bad, Aizawa grunted out, stepping into the room behind him and going to the podium. Several of the students nodded at that, accepting the excuse. Izuku sat down, and it was time for his school day to begin. Izuku looked up as the door opened, seeing Mike-sensei skulk into the room, in a good imitation of Aizawa's slouch. He was dressed in his civilian wear, minus the leather jacket that Izuku frequently saw him with. Although, instead of green spiraled eyes that Izuku was familiar with, they were black. Did he put in colored contacts? Izuku shifted, unused to the black eyes. Instantly, he heard murmurs of confusion break out, even as Aizawa left the room. Quiet down, I'm Yamada Hizashi, your sub for English. Whispers of confusion, and it was Ashido who spoke up. Mike-sensei? She questioned. Mike-sensei, or rather, Yamada-sensei, seemed to release a tired sigh. I know we look similar, it's a bit annoying to be honest. Izuku wanted to laugh. It was hilarious seeing Mike act like Aizawa, and Izuku knew that Mike-sensei's given name was Hizashi, so it was likely his family name was Yamada, or would he be an Aizawa now as he was married to Aizawa-sensei? Wait, he was making assumptions. Could Aizawa-sensei be a Yamada? Izuku would have to ask Aizawa later. The lesson went on, even more dull without Mike-sensei hyping them up as he normally did with his wide gesturing and beaming grin. Actually, Izuku looked around and saw that most of his classmates were on the verge of falling asleep. Still, as he listened to some of the whispered conversations, he heard how his classmates seemed to truly believe that Yamada-sensei was a different person. They didn't think that Mike-sensei could act so down to earth. Izuku paused, having the feeling of being watched. He shifted a bit, uneasy as he looked around, trying to see if anyone was staring at him. Yet, he couldn't see anyone. He huffed, glancing up to the ceiling to try and still his nerves, when he spotted a bit of white in the vent. Looking closer to the vent, he saw Aizawa-sensei looking down into the class. Izuku supposed the teacher had wanted to see how the prank went. He turned back to the lesson and caught Mike's gaze, the teacher's currently black eyes meeting his own. Mike flickered his eyes up briefly and then rolled them. Ah, so the teacher knew that Aizawa was in the vents. Izuku gave a hesitant grin back, amused by the situation. The entire silent communication went unnoticed by the class as it happened in a second, the teacher continuing to teach. As such, make sure you are careful in the way you order your words, as saying it the wrong way can give off a completely different meaning. Yamada-sensei finished up the lesson in a bland, dead-to-the-world voice. The bell rang and he shuffled out of the room. Midnight-sensei came in next, and Izuku glanced up, seeing the empty vent. Aizawa was probably following Mike-sensei through the vents, keeping an eye on how the prank was going. The day continued to pass as normal, though he had his first counseling session with Hound Dog, this being a more introductory so the court counselor could determine when it would be best for them to have their actual meetings. Soon lunch was over and he was returning to classes. Alright, before we start today's lesson, I want to ask your thoughts on the sub, the teacher asked in a tired voice as he came back in after the lunch PRD was over. He was weird, Karo, Azui commented. Yeah. He looked like a clone of Mike-sensei, only with a different hairstyle, eyes, and clothes, but he acted nothing like Mike-sensei. Kaminari agreed. Is Mike-sensei alright? Why was there a sub? Ida asked. Other students made sounds of agreement. Mike is fine. In fact, you all failed today's lesson, except for Midoriya who was exempt. Eh? The class shouted, instantly outraged, Bakugo demanding to know how he had failed. Izuku got the feeling Aizawa was giving that wide grin he had seen during the quirk apprehension test. Come on in, Aizawa said, gesturing at the door, and Mike-sensei walked in, now in his hero gear. Yeah. Today's lesson was to figure out when someone was pretending to be someone else. I even made it obvious for you kids. Mike-sensei shouted, giving finger guns at everyone. Izuku blinked, so they had turned the prank into a lesson, made it seem as if it was planned. Why was Deku exempt? Uraraka questioned. Black Eyes glanced at him for a second. Midoriya found out about it beforehand. Aizawa answered. He sighed in relief, not wanting his classmates to know it had been his idea. How did you find out about it, you demon nerd? Bakugo demanded, outraged. Is it because Mike-sensei picks you up in the morning? Ida questioned. Why, Izuku answered, nodding his head to Ida. What do you mean Mike-sensei picks you up? Yaoyorozu asked. Be because of my injuries. They have been picking me up to make sure I get to SC school and home safely, Izuku answered, shifting nervously as he felt the entire class look at him. He shrunk down a bit. That makes sense, Ojiro said. Bakugo scoffed. Why the hell are you not healed anyways? Are you pretending to be injured or something again? Bakugo! That is not something you should assume. Midoriya was injured greatly in the USJ attack. Of course he needs time to heal. Ida stated, narrowing his eyes as his hands did that robotic chopping motion. Doesn't Recovery Girl heal up all wounds instantly though? Bakugo returned, glaring. She heals people up at the cost of their stamina. Due to the extent of the injuries Midoriya and Aizawa-sensei got, it is possible they didn't have enough stamina to fully heal, Hagakure answered. Bakugo scoffed, but shut his mouth upon seeing the glare from Aizawa. Now, for our next lesson we will be having a race. You may use all resources at your disposal, including your quirk in order to reach the end goal, but each of you will be given a fake injury to work around in order to reach the end. For some the injury may be a broken leg, others a broken arm. This is to give you experience of figuring out ways around handicaps. The start of the race will be here, and the end goal is the roof. Aizawa listed each student and what injury they had, pushing a button and out of the wall slid a container which contained crutches and casts. Ida had a broken leg, Bakugo a broken arm, and other students had various fake broken bones. Izuku, already being injured, didn't have to have a fake injury. He took the time while the others were putting on the equipment to go onto his phone and open the app. After all, Aizawa had pointed out that they could use all resources. He looked for the closest vent access that wasn't a grate and found one in the hallway. Looking at the map, he looked for the vent elevator he knew existed. Navigating the app found a navigation feature where he could actually put in where he wanted to go and get the shortest route. Once they were ready, Aizawa had them all sit in their chairs. Now, as this is a simulation, using the main elevator will result in a death. Consider it booby-trapped. While it is not actually trapped, there are traps and villains set for you. Several of the staff have taken it upon themselves to play villains, and they have let their students trap the building as we have been preparing. So do be careful of actual traps. Remember, you can use whatever resources or quirks at your disposal to reach the roof in the quickest way possible. Now begin. Instantly it was a madhouse, students trying to rush to the door in order to get out as quick as possible. Uraraka and a few others with useful quirks headed towards the window, planning to scale the outside of the building. It was a bit funny to watch them trip and stumble over the crutches, and those with broken arms tripping over those who had fallen and struggling to get up. Izuku, having gotten used to moving with crutches, managed to get out of the room behind a few others and turned, going away from them towards another nearby room, which he had found had a drop. Looking into the room, he found it was some sort of unoccupied office, so he entered and double-checked no one was there. Then he double-tapped the red section on the map, bracing himself for the drop-down. The app updated his route and he carefully walked through the vent, going slow and somewhat steadyish. He made it to the room with the elevator and saw Aizawa already waiting there. The teacher must have used a different entrance. Well, I suppose I did specify the main elevator and not all elevators. The teacher grumbled as the elevator opened and the two entered into the tight squeeze. The other elevators are a long way off. Even for Lida using his E-engines it would be longer than C climbing the S stairs. Though those with W wounded arms would probably F find it quicker, as they can avoid the T-traps. Aizawa just grunted, giving a nod to Izuku's assessment. The elevator finished its journey up and the two headed off, Izuku following the app and Aizawa walking ahead of him, disappearing around a corner, going his own path to the roof. Izuku was slow after all on the crutches. He took another few minutes and tapped the app, checking no one else was nearby. Seeing that the path was clear, he double-tapped on the red outline, dropping down in front of the roof access door. He opened the door and made his way up the stairs. When he got up, Aizawa was already there, as was Uraraka, Shiro, and Tokoyami. Deku, you made it up quickly, Uraraka said, beaming at him. You're the first to arrive of those who chose to try going through the ground. Mineta and Shoji tried to scale the wall with us, but weren't able to make it up. Azui and Yaoyorozu were still coming up, last I looked. Moments later the two showed up, looking more worn out. Yaoyorozu held a grappling hook in her hand. And Azui's arm shook, the other in a cast. Another minute passed, and the door flung open, Bakugo charging out, a triumphant look on his face, until he saw everyone else gathered around. He had a bit of paint on him, and his Izuku thought he saw some smoke drifting from the boy's hair. Red eyes narrowed at Izuku. Dekyuden nerd. How did you beat me up here? No one even saw you. Secret. Izuku squeaked out, taking a couple nervous steps back, eyeing the blonde warily. He shifted the crutches to one arm, wanting a hand free in case Kacchan decided to attack him. The blonde certainly looked angrily enough for it. But it also left him with a hand to rub at his eyes, which still felt odd. Not hurting, but that strange pressure was strange, and never seemed to go away. Bakugo took a step forward, his free hand reaching forward, and small explosions were let out. You better answer me, the boy started to threaten, before the sparks cut off. Midoriya doesn't have to tell you how he completed the race. He used what he had at his disposal, same as you did. Now, will you calm down? Aizawa questioned, eyes red and hair floating for a couple seconds before stopping. Izuku, who was standing closer to the teacher, heard him hiss in pain. Sensei, he whispered out, worried for the man he trusted. Aizawa wasn't fully healed yet. He needed to rest and not use his quirk. The teacher looked at him for a moment, black eyes seeming to debate something. Eye drops, third pouch on left. Izuku nodded, opening the pouch and grabbing the eye drops. He heard Aizawa huff as he lowered down, letting Izuku stand above him and dropping the eye drops in. The teacher stood back up and Izuku slipped the eye drops back into the man's pouch. The other students may see it as just the teacher having Izuku help him relieve his dry eye, but Izuku was fairly sure it was a sign of trust. Would Aizawa let any of the other students help him? He wasn't sure, but he didn't think the teacher would. Don't make me do that again, Bakugo, Aizawa growled. The boy scoffed and turned away. Ashido was the second to arrive, and Ito was right on her heels, soon followed by more and more students. Then the lesson was over and Aizawa had them take off the fake casts and they walked back through the school, and Izuku looked at the halls astonished. It looked like a battlefield. Burn marks and broken pieces of traps were leveled through the building. They arrived back in the classroom, and Aizawa went over various information, explaining that sometimes a hero had to look for less obvious routes to get somewhere faster, such as going out of the way to avoid traps, that it would have been faster for those who took the ground to go to the other elevators and up them then through the trapped halls if they had broken arms. Is that the route you took, Sensei? Azui questioned. No, Aizawa answered as the bell rang. Class is dismissed. Everyone left the room and Izuku stayed behind. I'm going to be a minute. Go find Zashi. He should be in room 2C. All right, Izuku answered, walking out of the room and down the hall for a bit. He was only a short distance and a couple turns away from the classroom when he turned a corner and froze upon seeing Bakugo there glaring at him. You owe me answers, Deku. I want to know how you beat me, how you have a quirk, how you think that you are better than me. You are nothing more than a pebble. So why is it that you are beating me? What the hell is going on with you? The red-eyed kid shouted. Izuku flinched back as the blonde released explosions. He wanted the explosions to stop. He heard running, but Kacchan was stepping forward and Izuku's instincts screamed at him to do something. Instincts had him pushing at the pressure in his eyes, even as he moved backwards, trying to get away. The pops stopped. Bakugo seemed to freeze, his angry expression morphing first into shock and then outrage. What the F dash? The boy screamed. Bakugo! Stop this instant, or do you want to be suspended? Mike-sensei said, coming around the corner. Mick's attention turned to him and his mouth fell open. Midoriya, you might want to blink. Izuku did, wincing as his eyes seemed even drier than before, and he wondered how long he had been holding them open. Bakugo, you have detention, go to midnight, Mike said, and Bakugo growled, but left. Mike took a couple steps forward hesitantly. Midoriya, do you know how you were using erasure? What? Izuku stated, wide-eyed. The voice hero nodded. I carry some eye drops on me here. The teacher pulled them out and stepped closer, handing them to Izuku, who shifted to get a hand free and used the eye drops. Sighing a bit as he felt relief. I think we need to go see Recovery Girl, Mike stated. Izuku just nodded, hesitantly falling in step with the English teacher. Couldn't help but watch the teacher more than he had been. Dealing with Bakugo had been stressful, and then apparently he was using erasure? How was he using that quirk though? The only quirk he knew of was One for All, and his own mysterious quirk hadn't shown up in years. They took a brief stop at 1A, which was on the way to the nurse's office. We need to go to Recovery Girl, the little listener dash. Mike was cut off as Aizawa shot up. What happened? Did he get hurt? Was it Bakugo? Mike let out a chuckle. He's not injured. The incident did deal with Bakugo, but the main reason we're going to Recovery Girl is that Midoriya somehow used erasure. What? Aizawa flatly stated. Yeah, red eyes, hair shifting around as if underwater, the whole deal. Aizawa walked over to them. To Shizenji it is. With that, the three began to once more go to Recovery Girl's nurse's office. Shoyuta stood, watching as Shizenji looked over Midoriya, the child who according to Hizashi used erasure. Alright dearie, do you think you can try and activate erasure again? She asked him. The boy looked nervous, but nodded. A moment later green eyes were red and Izuku's hair shifted, as if there was an invisible breeze. The woman gave a nod and had Midoriya release the quirk. She went to the desk and pulled out a small device. She went towards Midoriya, who shifted away, eyeing the strange device warily. Shizenji just smiled. This is a ophthalmoscope. It will help me to look into your eyes. It will shine a light and I can look through it like a microscope, okay? Midoriya nodded, and Shoyuta stood nearby, watching her work silently. Hizashi on the other hand was pacing around, worried that something might be wrong. The nurse stood back up. I see, Shoyuta. Would you mind if I looked into your eyes for a moment? You too, Hizashi. Both of them sat down and she looked into their eyes. She'd scared at him after she looked. You used your quirk, didn't you? I warned you that if you used it you could damage your eyes. You got lucky this time, but it's going to take them longer to heal now. Shoyuta grimaced behind the bandages, but he was relieved that he didn't further injure his eyes. It had been a risk, but one he felt necessary to take. Right, but I did notice that Midoriya's eyes have that secondary pupil and iris. I will have to do an MRI scan, and depending on the results, we might have to go to an optometrist. Follow me. She started walking off towards a side room. Now, it's not every day I have to make use of the scanner, though I don't know why Nizu insisted on us having it. Frankly, it's surprising just how useful it is. Outside of the room she paused. Make sure you remove all metal before entering the room. They took a couple minutes removing everything metal. The three of them entered the room after her, and Shoyuta saw a large MRI device. The MRI room had another door that led off. Shizenji finished the preparations for Midoriya, having him change into a hospital gown. Once he came back in, she directed him to lay down on the table. Midoriya did, and she pushed the table in so the kid was encased. She led Hizashi and him over to the other room, which had a computer with 6 monitors which were displaying various info. With a few clicks the scanner started up. It took time for it to scan, about 40 minutes of them just sitting and waiting. After it was complete the results started to process and Shizenji had Midoriya exit and come back into the side room with them. A couple minutes passed before the image popped up, though it wasn't anything Shoyuta could understand. Shizenji pulled up a second brain image, this one a bit different looking than the first. She gave a small hum, eyebrows furrowing. Then she pulled a third brain up, this one he recognized as his own scan that had been done after he was injured to make sure he didn't sustain any damage to his brain. They stood around, all of them looking at the scans, even though none of them made sense of the scan. I will have to send it to a neurologist to be sure, but take a look at these sections here, she said, pointing at an area of the brain towards the back. This section is the occipital lobe, which is the part of the brain that deals with vision. This image is what it normally looks like. Now if we look at Shuta's here, we can see that his has a small section that is a lighter color. When I first came across it, I thought it was a tumor, but my fellow healer told me that it was actually a key. part to shoot his quirk, allowing him to see when his quirk is active, if this was damaged to badly, or removed. Then while Shoyuta could still use his quirk, he would be unable to see with it active. Now, take a look at Midoriya's scan. They all did, eyes going onto the area she had pointed out. Shoyuta saw that small white area. As you can see, Midoriya has this secondary optical gland. What does that mean, that he has erasure and this superpower quirk? Hizashi questioned, a doubtful tone coloring his voice. She huffed, shaking her head as a brief look of annoyance crossed her face. Now, normally I would say that this was something he had all along, but remember that sample you brought this morning? Yeah, Hizashi responded, a worried look in his eyes. Right, well, most of the sample you brought me seems to be vitreous humor mixed with melted sclera, though the diagnosis did discover parts that make up the retina and iris. Shoyuta frowned. What sample are you talking about? Oh, I forgot to tell you. Well, I did tell you the little listener was hurt all weekend, but when I returned in I saw he had set his laundry basket out and spotted a pillowcase on top with this strange white stuff. So Midoriya came out, saw me looking at it and explained that he had discovered it. Where did you say you found it again, little listener? Around my eyes, Midoriya answered. Right, so he said he found it around his eyes and that he didn't know what it was, so I figured we could take a scan of it, in case it had something to do with how ill Midoriya was. Shizenji sighed. Well, it makes my suspicions a lot more likely now. And what were your suspicions? Shoyuta questioned. That Midoriya's eyes completely remade themselves this weekend, possibly also that secondary optical gland. If his body was in the process of completely remaking parts of his body, it would give him a headache and issues with his eyes. Did you have any issues with your vision this weekend? Midoriya nodded. Friday after the medicine K kicked in I couldn't really see straight. Saturday when I woke up they felt like they were burning. I tried opening them at that point and I couldn't see anything, it was all white. My head hurt a lot. So I just curled up on my bed and eventually passed out from the pain. Next time I woke up was Sunday and everything was fine. I could see, no headache, but that weird white stuff. I ate some food and returned to bed, since I was still exhausted. And next I woke up was to Mike Sensei came knocking at the door. It seems likely then that Midoriya's eyes remade themselves to be able to use erasure, though I don't know why, but I assume it might have something to do with Shizenji cut off, shaking her head. Well, I assume it has something to do with his quirk, that it might not be as simple as just superpower like you originally thought, Midoriya. I would like to have a personal friend of mine come over. She has a quirk that can determine what quirks are. I don't know when she will be able to come over, so keep on the lookout for a text from me, Hizashi. The voice hero nodded. Right, while everything appears to be proper, I would recommend you to not use erasure until my friend has arrived to see how exactly your quirk works. Midoriya nodded, agreeing to her terms. Good, now Midoriya, if you experience any other odd pain I want you to call my number, or if you can't have a parent hold on to my number so they can get a hold of me. I'll give a CC copy to auntie, the boy whispered, his stuttering getting worse mentioning her. Recovery girl paused, looking at him. Not your mom or dad? I is ill, and dad works overseas to support us. Shoyuta mentally raised an eyebrow at that, since they knew nothing about Midoriya's dad. The only thing they knew was that Midoriya's uncle worked overseas as well. What is your mom ill with? Recovery girl asked. Midoriya shrugged. I don't know what it is, she's mostly unresponsive you unless asked a Q question, or told to do something on normal days. Recovery girl nodded. Alright, I guess this aunt of yours will do then. Hizashi grimaced at that and Shoyuta pursed his lips behind the bandages. Recovery girl noticed Hizashi's grimace, and raised an eyebrow at him. His aunt is Mrs. Bakugo, we ran into her once when dropping Midoriya. Huff. The healer nodded. Alright, Midoriya, I want you to have a text drafted up, so all you have to do is press send, that way if your pain is deliberating levels you won't have to type everything up. If you send it by accident, just shoot a second text saying that's what happened. Midoriya nodded and took the offered number, putting it into his phone and typing it up. Then he added a message and showed it. Midoriya here, Need help? I'm at. And then he pointed to a GPS button that he could click and it would attach his location to the text. Looks good, kiddo, Shoyuta stated, nodding his head. Recovery girl bid them farewell and the group walked out of the nurse's office into the empty school building, the last student having left about a half hour ago as it was starting to get late. It was silent as they made their way to the car, and Shoyuta wasn't sure what to think about all the new information. Midoriya's quirk, what was it? First, the doctor lies and says he has the double pinky toe joint. Second, the quirk doesn't make itself known until the boy was 15, at the day of the entrance exam, so the registry is updated to superpower as the quirk appears to be a super strength type quirk. Now though, the boy has developed erasure seemingly out of the blue. So obviously Midoriya's original quirk is not just super strength, but possibly a quirk that gave him other people's quirks. Yet, how is Midoriya's quirk determining what quirks it would copy? As unlike that 1B student, Midoriya wasn't copying everyone he touched, or he would have discovered it at a young age. And there hasn't been any sort of time limit with that superpower portion of the quirk, which Shoyuta assumed was copied from All Might. The two quirks had always been close, but it was still different than All Might's quirk, as Midoriya didn't buff up or anything when using it. Perhaps Shoyuta would have to ask All Might more about his quirk, see if it ever displayed those red veins he had seen on Midoriya during the quirk assessment test. Nearing the end of the trip, Midoriya finally spoke up, asking a hesitant, "Are you mad at me? That I see copied your Q quirk?" "No, I'm not, why would I be? If you can use erasure, then that means I can teach you how to use it, and you wouldn't have to rely on that other bone-breaking part of your quirk. Besides, if your quirk is some sort of copy quirk, that will make you a very versatile hero, but you also have to learn about the quirks you copied. It will be tough to learn how to use the quirks as well as the original user, since you wouldn't have had the quirk as long, but if you put in the effort you would become a strong hero who can save a lot of people. I think it's really cool you have erasure. It's like your show's son. I know he always wanted a child to take care of." Shoyuta blushed. "Zashi," he snapped out, embarrassed. Glancing out the corner of his eye showed that Midoriya was also blushing in embarrassment from being called Shuta's son. His husband laughed, pulling into the parking lot, the two getting out the vehicle and heading up the apartment. Shoyuta waited for his husband to come back down. The kid did spend a lot of time with them, but that was only because he was injured, plus the kid was shy and had just started to open up to them. He hoped the kid could trust them, but he did notice that Midoriya's stutter was less when it was just the two of them. He glanced out the window, wondering what was taking Hizashi so long, and paused, seeing that his husband must have gone inside the apartment. A little while later and he came back out, sighing. "What happened?" "I just had another talk with Mrs. Bakugo," Hizashi started as he started the vehicle and drove away. Shoyuta stayed silent, waiting for Hizashi to tell him what happened.